IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. And now that it's Wednesday, it means a couple things for us here at Irish Breakdown. First and foremost, Notre Dame had their fourth spring practice today that Brian and I got to go see. And it's also buy, sell, hold. So we're going to have a loaded show for you here today. We're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to break down what we saw on the offense, the offensive side of practice. We're going to talk about what we saw on defense. And as always, for our premium message subscribers, we have our buy, sell, hold today where you guys get to ask us some topics and questions to ask us about. So without further ado, I'm excited to jump into this today, Brian, because it's the fourth practice. Spring is moving along. We got to see him today in helmets and shoulder pads, not just helmets. Got to see a little bit more physicality as opposed to the first time we got to see him. So the offseason is often chugging away, man.
Yeah, man, I so love it, Trev. I woke up this morning and, Rita had a rough night last night. She was sick. So, I'm up every 30 minutes and I'm exhausted. I'm like, God, just don't want to go to this practice today. Just one of them things. And I get in the car and I'm driving on my way. We're talking. And as soon as I get on campus, I told you I sprained my foot the other day. So just walking up to practice is just in a lot of pain. And I'm just like, dude, I don't want to be here. And as soon as I walk through the doors and there's practice, I'm like, yep, I'm excited. I'm ready to be here. And my whole attitude changed. Just being out there, just practice and just seeing the players and just know that we're one day closer to football. And it's amazing how it can kind of have that sort of attitude change where I'm just like all these things I'm dealing with. And then you get that going and it's like, dude, let's roll, man. Let's absolutely roll. So a lot to see today. Again, a lot to discuss today. We only see 4 periods, just a reminder. So this isn't, so if I say, hey, so-and-so had the best day, it's the best day of what we saw. We don't know what happened after we left. And just keep that in mind. So those are things that they always have to throw those caveats in there. When you only see 4 periods of practice, we're not meant to say, well, this guy's going to start at this position because he looked the best in the first 4 periods where they're doing individual and routes on air or something. So that's kind of just want to make sure I throw that caveat out there, but it's still, Trev, impressive nonetheless and fun nonetheless to be able to evaluate these players and get a look at them.
Look, Brian, I get where you're coming from, man. I was up at 4:30 this morning. We hopped in the shower. I drove straight up to South Bend from Indianapolis. Not a long drive. It's just a very straight, boring drive. You don't get to see a whole lot. But again, I'm with you, man. You get on that campus, you start to feel good. You walk in the facility. It's like, all right, I know I'm not the one practicing, but it makes you feel good. You're around it. You're around football again in a time of year where it's not a whole lot of it going on right now. And so I'm excited to jump into it today with you, Brian. And where we're going to start is we're going to start with the offense. Brian, I know you got a lot of time in getting down and seeing what was going on with the offensive drills just to give you guys a window in. Just because we only have limited eyes. Ideally, we get to see every facet that goes on. But me, Brian, and Sean Stiers, we're only 3 people there trying to kind of get a scan of everything that's going on at spring practice. So our rhythm, Brian's checking out the offense, and he's keeping tags on them, and I'm checking out the defense. So, Brian, starting off with the quarterbacks, because obviously that is a hot topic of conversation going on in the offseason right now for Notre Dame. What did you see from the quarterbacks today in the first couple periods of practice?
I mean, let's be real about something else, Trev. You can talk all you want about the quarterback battle and all that, but dude, I played quarterback, I coached quarterback. I'm watching the quarterbacks, whether there's a quarterback battle or not. That's just how it's going to be. But no, it was good to see him out there. Obviously, what we saw today. The beginning was sort of a normal practice. They went through their normal warm-up drills. They're throwing, 45-degree angles and doing different things and then working on drills. And I really like how they maximize the reps with quarterbacks. So doing things where, they drop back and they've got thrown to the left. They'll have a back just kind of there, almost like it's a little quick route or a check down or an option route. They'll throw it, reset their feet. Someone will throw them a second ball. They'll grab it, set their feet, and then throw like a deep out cut kind of thing. So just kind of going through that. Then they get together and they start working on routes on air. And they'll have 4 quarterbacks going at once, and they'll run a bunch of routes going this way, and then they'll all come down. Then they'll go that way. So just working on some different route combinations with the quarterbacks. And so that's what we're watching. That's what we're evaluating today. So we didn't see 7. I saw 1 rep of 7-on-7 as we're walking out. And that rep was, I believe it was CJ Carr threw completed a pass. That's it. And I'm not going to evaluate it because we're not supposed to watch that part because we're leaving. But I'm just letting you all know that's all we saw from practice. But what we did see, I want to talk about, because it was another reminder of these are really talented quarterbacks. I mean, this is a very talented room, and including the rookie, Blake Hebert. This is a talented room. It's a much different looking room than we've seen in past years. And so today, you look at the evaluation, I kind of like to start with who I thought was most impressive. And today it was CJ Carr by quite a bit. Trev, I know you got a chance to, because look, I tell Trevor to watch the defense, but I know he's a former quarterback as well. He's going to be like, oh, I accidentally looked left where the quarterbacks are. My bad. So I know he has an opinion, and we talked about it on the way to get breakfast this morning. But I thought CJ was easily the most impressive today. And, the ball just comes out very naturally, Trev. He's got incredibly clean mechanics. Just everything is today was just precise and just clean and quick and sharp. The thing I noticed too, and this is something that, like, CJ making good decisions is not a surprise. CJ being accurate should never be a surprise. The big question for me coming into the spring of what we're going to be able to evaluate is, does he have the same juice that he had before the arm injury? And that's what you saw today, Trev, is that the answer is yes. Are his mechanics as clean post-injury as they were before? Because that doesn't always happen once guys have injuries, and they are. And he was very sharp today. Just accuracy was just on point. Everything was like in some sort of like a window, like this big of a window of where the ball's supposed to be. He was in it every rep that I saw. He threw the best corners today. Last time it was Kenny that was just money on the corner routes. Today, CJ was money on the corner routes. The routes we saw them throw today, for the most part, they were throwing outs, they were throwing slants, they were throwing corners, and they were throwing backside digs. I'm not giving away any secret sauce. All those routes are on film for Notre Dame. This is just, I'm not even telling you like it's not so much like a sequence. It's like different times they were working on those different routes, and then some seam routes. And CJ just was sharp all day. And just the timing of it. I mean, they get to snap at the same time, and it still impresses me how quickly him and Kenny especially just get the ball and get it out, but then get it out with velocity. And that's the big thing that you saw from CJ today. Just very sharp, Trev. Ball coming out, just jumping out of his hand. His corner routes were just dropping right over the top. His out cuts were, it's funny, you watch CJ when he's from behind, when he's kind of going away from me, you can really see it then, especially. But the ball, the trajectory of the way the ball comes out of his hand, the nose of the ball is just really, I'm just trying to think of the word. I was going to say pristine, but that's not it. It's exactly what you want from a quarterback, because you don't want the nose to be too up. You don't want it to be too down. You want it to kind of just be slightly up, and then it comes down as it gets to the pass catcher. And that's what CJ's ball was looking like today. Was throwing the out cuts with a lot of gas. Was throwing the backside digs. His footwork. So on a backside dig today, it wasn't reading and then coming to the backside dig like we saw in the spring. It was literally, I'm throwing the backside dig. And so he would actually look all of them. They would look left and then come back to the dig to time it up appropriately, even though they've got 4 guys throwing at once. And his footwork is by far the cleanest when doing that type of thing. It's just look left, snap, boom. His feet are in perfect position. And he's just drilling a dig route, right where it needs to be. And on the dig throws today, it was either here or here is where he had the dig throws. And you don't want a dig route way out here. You want to put a dig right on a guy. Because if you throw it out here, now that's when guys can kind of come through, either undercut it, come over the top. So like if I'm here and I catch a dig here and I got the corner trailing, he can come through and punch my arm down and knock the ball out. Or if I'm catching out here and a safety's coming down and he hits me, then I don't have the ball secured. It's out here. If I got the ball here, he can come down here, but I'm able to be more firm with the football when I'm holding it in my hand when I catch it here or in my body. So that's where you see that precision from him today. You saw that. He was incredibly sharp. Kenny threw the ball. Kenny also, and CJ is starting to carry himself a little bit more assertively as well. You can just kind of see it's like, okay, I gotta show that I'm the guy a little bit. Kenny also was that way today. That's been the biggest noticeable change. Like, oh, Kenny Minchie threw with velocity. Well, duh. I mean, been doing that since his junior year of high school. Oh, Kenny Minchie threw a pretty ball today. Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I grade him as a top 100 player. The big knock on Kenny his first 2 years at Notre Dame, and it's crazy that he's been here now going into his third year. Just wild. But the thing about Kenny was he didn't always carry himself with sort of that swagger you want in the quarterback. You could just kind of see his shoulders would be a little slouched down. He didn't have his chest puffed up. Just kind of methodically went through his business. Much different looking Kenny Minchie so far in the first 2 open periods. Much more pep in his step, much more assertive. You know, he would kind of methodically go from one position to the next last year during the four-man routes. Not today, man. He's like getting lined up, first guy to get lined up. You could tell Kenny is battling. He is competing for this job. And then he threw the ball well today. If it wasn't for how good CJ was, I would be raving much more about the job Kenny did today throwing the football. Because, Trev, it's kind of like when these two kids are throwing next to each other, I don't remember Kenny throwing an incomplete pass. But it's about degrees of CJ was hitting it right here, and Kenny was hitting it right here, and then Steve was hitting it right here. I mean, that's what we're breaking down now with how well these guys do the football. Like, I'm going to be very critical of Steve Angeli's performance today. I also don't remember a ball of his hitting the ground. I mean, that's that kind of thing that I thought they as a group were pretty sharp today as a group. I don't remember seeing any just like, wow, that was a terrible ball today. So we're talking about degrees of precision, and Kenny was just not quite as sharp. As good as he was throwing the corner routes the other day, he was just off today, Trev. He was kind of behind on several corner throws. That's not where you want to throw a corner unless you're putting it on him because it's cover 2 and you're trying to get it into that window and the corner is down, so you don't got to worry about the corner coming underneath it. Like, you want to throw that kind of route, the safety or the corner, one of the two is going to have a chance to play that ball. So just a little bit off today. Couple of the slants were just a little bit too far out in front. And when I mean too far out in front, I mean from what I want from a perfection standpoint. They were all catchable, and they all got caught. He just wasn't quite as sharp today as he was the first day that we saw him, but he was still pretty good. And you now look at the two performances together. You have to come away impressed with those two young kids because, again, they just throw the ball like Trev. You've seen it. And you can confirm it. It just looks so much more. It just looks so much more explosive and accurate, and the arm speed is so much different when you're talking about the two younger players. And that's what you like to see when you're going through drills. Again, we're going through drills. They didn't have to read a single defense today in practice. They didn't have to decipher, do I throw this 2-hole throw? Should I come to the backside? How do I handle the pressure? Should I climb the pot? We didn't see any of that today because we don't get access to that. So, again, this isn't me saying CJ looked the best here, he's the starter, or Kenny looked the best here, he's the starter. I'm just telling you how they look throwing during drills, and it's an impressive thing. And I enjoy watching these kids throw. I mean, just absolutely enjoy watching these kids throw, and they both spin it incredibly well. Steve was very off target today, Trev. And it's funny, Trevor, we're in the car, and after practice, and we're going to go get breakfast. And Trevor was like, yeah, I didn't think Steve was really off today. And I said, let me guess. You thought a lot of his throws were high. And he's like, yeah. I said, that's kind of how Steve usually starts practice. And Steve is usually the least accurate guy early in practice. So I could sit here and tell you how rough it looked and be like, see, this is why those two guys should start. But that would be confirmation bias. Steve rarely looks like the sharpest quarterback early, and here's why. And here's why: a lot of his throws are high, a A lot of his throws are late. A lot of his throws that were over were kind of behind. The reality is this: Steve has very long levers as a passer. And I got a picture that my wife took from the first practice. You know, when CJ throws, it's like right here. When Kenny throws, it gets to right here. And there's a picture of Steve throwing, and it's like way back here. And his stride can get long. Trev, you noted that when we were talking. His stride tends to get very long. Steve is not a compact thrower. And when you are a longer levers with your throwing, a lot of times it's going to take you longer to get into your groove with your release point. And that's what Steve's issue tends to be a lot early in practices. And that's why a lot of times once you get to 7-on-7 or team, he'll look better from a ball placement standpoint than he did early. So that's something to keep in mind when I'm telling you that Steve was definitely the most off target today. Is like, if you're a Carr Minchie guy, don't run with that and like, see, Steve sucks, or that he tends to be that way because he's got those long levers. And Trev, that's just how he's going to throw. He's a senior in college. That's not going to change. That's what warm-ups are for. That's what pregame is for, is to get you into that groove. And so that's just something that I noticed from him. But as I said, Trev, there's a very clear difference in velocity. When you look at him compared to the other two quarterbacks, there's a very clear difference in just ball placement. When you look at that, there just is. And that was very noticeable again today. So those are the three that I primarily focused on at the quarterback position. I thought there was last practice, it was definitely Kenny was the best, but CJ was right behind him, and then Steve was there. This practice, it was a much clear CJ was definitely the best. There was a bit of a gap for Kenny, and then another bit of a gap from where Steve was. Again, just during those opening drill periods and the routes on air period.
I think a lot of what you talked about is a testament to what we all expected to see in what these spring practices were. With the margin for error being so small, you're talking about somebody having in Kenny not as sharp of a day, and it's because the ball is here, not here. Yeah, and that's the window of opportunity that we're talking about here, but that's what makes this competition so fun, so awesome to watch. One of the biggest things that stood out to me today about CJ is, I mean, realistically, he's going into his redshirt freshman year. And sometimes you think about redshirt freshmen starting at quarterback, I automatically, different body types, but I go back and I think about Everett Golson. And I watched a couple of old 2012 games the other day, and I was like, God, Everett just, you can tell he looks like a redshirt freshman. Because the difference of what he looked like in 2014 when he came back with the team and what he looked like in 2012, it was a noticeable difference. And with Kenny, with Kenny now, especially because he's now going into his third year, but with CJ having a full off season of weight training, he went through a full winter. I think now this is his second spring with the team. You can start to tell he's filling out a little bit too. But with how quick of a release that Kenny and CJ both have, it's nice that it's as accurate as what it is. Because sometimes you can have that quick release, but you might be a step behind. You might be a step too far in front of the receiver, especially on those slants, on those crossing routes, those deep in routes, and they're sharp, man. They look really, really sharp. Keeping the train rolling here, Brian, to the running backs, just kind of working our way through the offense. What were some of the things that stuck out to you today from the running back room?
So I didn't pay a ton of attention to the running backs. They just went through a lot of drill work. I will have some video. That's where I kind of was. So I was kind of videoing the running backs and then kind of keeping my eye on the quarterbacks, and just so I've got some video of them. It's an athletic group. The one guy that I paid a little bit of extra attention to today going through drills was Kedron Young. I just wanted to see, how he looked, Trev. I showed you that video after the practice, and you guys are going to see it. He's really agile and nimble for a 235-pound back. I mean, he's noticeably bigger than all the other running backs. And I also continue to be impressed by how well he catches the football. Like he is not your typical power back. He catches the football really well. Jeremiah Love today was going through drills with the receivers, and so we're probably going to have the same freak out when it comes to reporting. Like Jeremiah Love's actually also a receiver. No, he's not a receiver. He's a running back that's getting work with the receivers because they have always had a desire to have him do more things. Comfortable route runner, very comfortable getting in and out of breaks. Caught the ball okay today. Had a couple drops of balls that weren't kind of right on him. But overall, he's a weapon in the pass game, and it was good to see them having him work in the receiver drills while the running backs are going and doing other things, because I do think there's another element in the pass game that we would like to see them get to with Jeremiah. The offense wasn't geared towards that last year. I think it's going to be more geared a little bit more towards that this year, which was good to see. The other thing too, Trev, it was another guy that I always keep an eye on early in these practices is Jabron Payne. I want to see how, does he have his quickness back? Does he have his burst back? And he did. He was impressive. It's such a loaded room. We were talking during our drive. Like, you took about like a guy like Jabron Payne, probably is their. I mean, if we're being honest, just God-given ability, probably their number 6 back, 5th at best. Him and Nolan James, or he's ahead of Nolan James right now. I'm just talking about like pure God-given ability. I've said this before. If Jabron Payne was at like Indiana or Illinois, Iowa, someplace like that, I think he's 1,000-yard back. I mean, he's a really talented back. He's an athletic back. He's got really nice feet. He's got nice burst. He's built strong. It's just they're so loaded at running back. It's just hard to stand out in a room that also has Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young and now Nolan James. You're just like, man, it's just a really loaded room, very loaded room, very athletic room. I like what I'm seeing from Jawan Sider so far. The things he focuses on, footwork, efficiency, running with good pad level. Those things are all what you want to see. So that was good to see. And then just kind of some quick notes on the receivers. Kind of similar. There wasn't a lot of difference between what we saw the first day. Greathouse still leading him through the drills. He's always the first receiver through a drill. Jordan Faison went through drills again today, so he was out there doing things, which was good to see. He looks really sharp, real crisp, caught the ball very well. Jaden Greathouse caught the ball real well. I've noticed that so far they've only ever had Jaden in the slot, which I thought was interesting. We've seen both Jordan Faison and Will Pauling doing both, which I thought was interesting. But still Jaden in the slot. He looks great. Caught the ball well. Sharp routes. Jordan Faison looked good. We saw Will Pauling amp it up a little bit today. He's still last in all the drills. And when I speak to that, just understand that that's not like that's this 5th-year senior being last in all the drills. You want a guy that's a little bit more of a go-getter. No. He's always going to be last and needs to be last, because when you are on basically modified assignment, meaning you can't go full speed, the way that a lot of these receiver drills go, it's rapid fire. And if you're not going fast, then all of a sudden you clog up the drill. So whenever you have a guy that's not 100% or not going at 100% speed, you always have him kind of bring up the rear a little bit so he can kind of work through it and not have to worry about throwing off the timing of the drill. We saw that with Jaden Thomas last spring as well. But even with that, even though he was kind of last in a lot of those drills, you could see him ramping up the tempo a little bit, just coming off at a little bit more burst, just coming up at a little bit more speed. We saw him run routes. He's a little bit choppy, still a little bit on some of his top ends, but he's got really nice foot quickness. He's built stronger than I thought he was going to be. Like, I thought he was going to look a lot more like Jordan Faison, but you see him up close and personal. He's got some beef to him. He's a pretty strong looking athlete, but he catches the ball real clean. He was an impressive looking athlete today. Micah Gilbert wasn't out there. I don't know if we'll see him or not this spring. I don't know the answer to that. He kind of went out last time. He wasn't there today. We're not going to get a chance to talk to Marcus Freeman about it until next Saturday, so I got nothing on him. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what it's related to, but we'll find that out next week. But what that's done, Trev, is that's allowed us to see a lot more reps of some of those other guys because you don't necessarily have everybody out there. And so today we got a chance to see a little bit more Cam Williams. And, look, I don't have any problem getting fired up about the quarterbacks because I love the quarterback room. It's talented. I don't have any problem getting fired up about the running backs. But the one guy that I'm trying to tell myself, don't get too ahead of yourself. Don't get too fired up. Don't react too strongly because you're only seeing 4 practices. The one guy that I got to tell myself about, because I feel like I have a pretty good read on, guys, yes, CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey look great throwing the football. It's wonderful. I expected that. So but the one guy that I'm having a hard time, Trev, not getting a little amped up about in the first 2 open sessions is Cam Williams. And the reason why is because I don't want to make it seem like put the hype train on Cam and kind of start making it seem like, oh, he's ready. He's going to play 1 million snaps this year. I don't know. I don't know what he's doing when they get to the team period. You've got to know your responsibility and react to it. I don't know any of that. But just compared to where he was, even in the one practice we saw like during the playoffs, because remember the first round playoff game, we got to go see a practice. Cam still looked like wasn't sure what he was doing, didn't know what he needed to do, and just wasn't playing fast and wasn't catching the ball real crisp. First 2 practices today, saw the same thing I saw from Cam Williams in the first practice. Really clean going through drills, quick in and out of his breaks. He was super choppy last year because he wasn't sure what he was doing. Catching the ball real well, and the burst, you see the burst. You saw it, Trev, when he's running like a, like vertical routes during routes on air. You just see a kid that's playing with more urgency, more tempo. That kind of got me a little bit fired up. I'm not going to lie. I kept having to tell myself, you know what? We're not seeing any team. We're not seeing any 7-on-7. Don't get too fired up because of insert all the reasons. I always tell all the fans, guys, don't get too fired up from what these practice reports are just for. It's all I keep telling them, don't get too excited about a spring practice where we don't get to see any team. And with Cam Williams, it's hard. I got to keep reminding myself of that because the way he's looked in drills and routes on air, you're like, that's what I thought Cam Williams was going to look like. And that got me a little bit fired up from what I saw today, Trev. And I'll tell you, the freshman who has impressed me the most, without a doubt, is Elijah Burris. He is really quick and catches the ball extremely well. Like he has a lot more polish now than he did last summer when I saw him at Irish Invasion. So those are the guys that stood out for me the most from the practice today.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about a guy like Cam Williams, when you're that highly touted of a recruit, there's a lot of expectation that comes with it, but all we have to go on is based off of what we've seen. I didn't get to see what his practices looked like last season, but you did. And so I can understand where that excitement comes from. And then you just look at what some of the measurables are that we do know. There's not a lot of people on that roster in the wide receiver room that have that skill set and that build. Having the speed that he has, but a comparable size to a guy like Jaden Greathouse, that gets people excited.
Well, he's at least an inch taller than Jaden Greathouse, if not an inch and a half. And he's not as thick he's not as strong looking as Jaden is yet because he's a year behind, but he's wider.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's noticeably big. Especially with Micah Gilbert not out there, he's noticeably the biggest guy out there right now. Now that won't look the same way in this fall when Malachi Field shows up and Micah Gilbert's out there, but like he's noticeably the biggest guy out there right now. And with those 2 guys likely unavailable for right now, that means Cam Williams is probably going to get a lot of reps this spring. So, but yeah, Trev, you were saying like that frame and the skills, it's hard not to notice. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another guy's build that I wanted to touch on too, which I'm glad you brought up, was Will Pauling. He's built. I was with you. I thought he was going to be a little bit smaller, more of a Jordan Faison build. He's kind of built similar to DJ Moore, the wide receiver from the Bears, like kind of that shorter but like stockier after the catch type of guy. Like that was one thing that I noticed today. Now maybe it's just because they have, they both wear number 2, they both play wide receiver, but build wise it's similar. And I thought he was going to be more of that smaller slot receiver type of build. So that was impressive to see. And I'm all on board with you. Elijah Burris looks a lot more polished than what I thought as well. You can tell that there is a separation as far as him being the furthest ahead in his development right now in the college game in comparison to the 2 other freshman wide receivers as well.
Regarding Will Pauling, I think the way that I'll explain it is he looks a lot more like Jadarian Price than he does Jordan Faison in his build. Like he looks more like that cut kind of upper body type of thing. He's not as jacked as Jadarian is, but he just looks more like the running backs than he does the receivers. Now, he plays like a receiver. I'm just trying to give you guys a sense of kind of what his build looks like compared to the other two guys. But yeah, it's a good group. I just wish we could see a complete group. And that's kind of always the storyline at receiver is like we never get to see like the complete group. Malachi Fields is still at Virginia. Micah Gilbert's not out there. Just I'd love to see this room just complete. It'd be just nice to have that for once. It is. The tight ends don't do a whole lot. Trev, I did get a chance to see Ty Washington. I believe that was Ty Washington at practice today. Just standing around. He's still finished up his degree. I don't believe he's obviously not able to practice. He's kind of like where Bo Collins and them were last year. But he's a good-looking athlete, tall, long. That was the guy in the green sweats down there by tight ends.
Okay.
But he's a good-looking athlete. He's don't have a clue how well he's going to play football, but you want to see a guy like you see Kevin Bauman. He's just got like ankle brace. He's like just like all patched up. It's just like, man, that guy is a warrior, dude. Like that guy's at practice 5 of the spring, and he's just got all this different stuff on. You can just tell they're patching them together. But man, you just love that kid's desire to go out there and compete and be part of this team. I'll be honest, I probably would have hung it up by now if I was him. But the fact that he hasn't just says so much about that young man. I'm really rooting for him. In our job as analysts, Trev, we just call balls and strikes. We don't have favorites. But I'm not gonna lie, there's definitely some times where there's a kid that you just root for him to have success.
Yeah.
And Kevin Bauman's one of those kids. You just because his story's so cool and just what he's overcome and you just want to see him be able to finish his career in some good vibes. So like that story. Offensive line last, Trev. Emil Wagner not out there today. He was kind of, as we expected, there's going to be practices. He's not either full go or he's not out there. And it's not because there's nothing wrong with Emil. He just played 1,000 snaps this last year, and they're just trying to be careful with him. So, but as you'd expect from Emil Wagner, I actually had a chance to walk by him as I was outside with the offensive line, and I'm walking back into the field because the quarterbacks and receivers were getting ready to split off to do routes on air. So I went back inside, and I walked by Emil, and he's definitely put on some upper body weight, some good upper body weight as well. He's definitely filling out his upper body even more, a little thicker in the core area than he was last spring, which is a good sign. But he's out there just working on pass sets by himself. And he was like, yep, he's gonna still put in work today. But with him out and with Anthony Knapp out, you had 2 returners and 2 freshmen essentially at tackle. So today we saw Styles Prescott and Matty Augustine at left tackle and Gerby Lambert and Owen Strebick at right tackle. We saw Charles Jagasol and Sullivan Absher working exclusively at guard today. Sullivan did not take any center snaps today. That was Joe Otting, Cameron Herron, and Max Anderson, I believe, is the other tackle. And so they were doing a couple different drills. They had the centers and the guards at times working together on their zone footwork and working together on combos. And then the tackles were working on the sled, one-man sled, just working on coming off, flat back, driving your hips through contact, ripping your hands inside, keeping them tight, and just driving the sled. And they were doing that with I don't know if that's the GA or an analyst, but whoever's the guy working with Joe Rudolph at this time. And then Joe Rudolph was working with the group that was doing the zone stuff. And then the guards went over and worked on the sled. And then the centers and then the tackles came over. And they were actually working on centers and tackles, working on getting up to that, working on the zone stuff as well. So that was interesting to see. Couple observations from that. Again, there's no defense to go against. They're going against themselves. So it's just about gauging size and athleticism, things like that. Styles Prescott is a 6'6", 200 and almost 300-pound kid, and he looks small out there because of just how massive the rest of the offensive linemen are. Matty Augustine's a really big young man. He's easily 6'7", maybe plus. Really nice frame. He's listed at 292, I think, right now. It wouldn't shock me if he's a little bigger than that. He's going to easily be 300-plus pounds. His body reminds me a lot of Mike McGlinchey's, in that he's just a really broad-shouldered kid, but he's not a natural 300-pounder, but he's got a little bit more of a wider middle section, I think, than McGlinchey had. So he'll be 310 pounds like McGlinchey was, and then when he stops playing football, he'll get back to looking like a basketball player, which is what Matty Augustine started his high school career as. And then you're watching Gerby Lambert and Owen Strebig, and Gerby Lambert 6'6.5", and he's a good inch and a half shorter than Owen Strebig. But then you see Owen standing in front of, so like Owen's between me and Gerby. So I can't see Gerby this way, but I can see Gerby's arms and shoulders sticking out past Owen. That's how just massive that young man is. But that group of four is pretty athletic. Maddie and Styles both, showed me really good athleticism today. Maddie's got some nice punch for a young guy. Styles is healthy. That was the big thing. We didn't get to see a lot of him last year because he just wasn't healthy a lot. So it's good to see him out there, working on the foot quickness, the agility, playing with good pad level. He looked good today. We didn't see any pass drop stuff. It was all run game stuff. The thing I was curious about, Trev, with the tackles was, Gerby's plus 11, I think now, and he's listed at I think 334 on the roster, and he looks bigger. So I was like, okay, I mean, what kind of weight is that? As I said the other day, is that good weight room, natural weight, or is that, cheeseburger weight, ordering Papa John's every night weight? You know what I mean? And it looks good, and he's moving really well. Matter of fact, he looks quicker than he did in the fall, which a lot of times is like, I'm not actually more athletic. I just know where I'm going now, and I know what I'm supposed to do now. It could just be that. Definitely quicker, did a better job. Now, again, he still at times will lift up a little bit too much out of his stance. Want to see him keep kind of that, keep that butt down, keep bending at the waist or bending at the knees, come off, keep your pads low, and then really work. But really good foot quickness from him, good athleticism. Guys that big just aren't supposed to move like that. Really impressive young man. Same thing with Charles Jagasol. Now, again, at times, Charles, going through zone drills, he'll lift up a little bit too much and lose his leverage. He's got to get better at that. He's got to stay low, and that's something that's always going to be an issue for Jagasol, who's 6'7". But, man, when he keeps his knees bent and he keeps his pad levels low, Jagasol is an impressive athlete at that size, really impressive athlete, really good punch. I liked what I saw from Billy Schrouf today, moving really well. He looked healthy. He's still limited because he's returning, but he just looked good moving around. Peter Jones is a really impressive-looking player, coming off straight ahead, really good power, really good vertical quickness. He's got a lot tighter hips than a lot of those other guys. Him and Sullivan Absher are probably the two with the tightest hips at that position, but Sullivan's ahead of him. Sully had a good day as well, coming off with good power, coming off with good pad level. He actually, I thought, of the guards the tall guards and the tall linemen, I thought Sullivan was probably the most consistent keeping his pads low, working through the drills. And I wonder, Trev, and you had a question that you asked him, and I know you'll have a story about it at some point in time, but, about the fact that he's getting work at center now. And he talked about, just leverage, and you guys are going to read his response to Trevor got to ask his first question at a Notre Dame press conference today. But I wonder if that work at center is helping him just overall be focused on keeping your pads low and your base where it needs to be coming out of stance. Because I thought this is the best he's looked, in my opinion, going through drills, Travis, just playing with a good base and playing with good pad level. From what I've seen from Sully, he usually would have a tendency to get really high. So I thought he looked good today as well. This is a massive group, and they move really well. It really is an impressive group. Devin Houston's getting comfortable. Joe Wadding did his thing. A guy that I like today, and I kept a little bit of an eye on, is Cam Herron. He's built like a fire hydrant. I mean, he's just short. He's the shortest lineman they have, and it's noticeably so. He's got a very odd frame, and that's a good thing. He's short and stocky, but his arms, he's one of those kids you look like could scratch his knee without bending over. He's got such an exceptional arm length. But, it's kind of what you saw on film is evident. He's not great necessarily with the lateral quickness. He's got really nice vertical quickness, very nice punch, and he carries himself with a lot of confidence. But here's the thing I loved about Cam Herron. Whenever Joe Rudolph was talking, I'd see Cam Herron just locked in on what he was saying. Just sometimes you see a kid at a camp and you're just man, that kid's just coachable. And that's been my impression so far from Cam Herron. Is even when someone else is talking to another player, his eyes are locked in on what's going on. I liked that. I like those kind of guys that are just learning. And that also speaks well to, do you have the personality of a center? And that's something that so far, again, it's early, I've really been impressed with just how Cam Heron carries himself. Just going through drills and different things like that. You like to see that. And he's got some pop. When you see him hit the sled, Trev, he's got some pop in those hands too. But like Peter Jones, he's tight. He's tightly. So I don't know what his lateral quickness is going to be like, but working straight ahead, that kid's he's a, like I said, man, he's built well. He's built well. So that's my offensive overview, Trev. Yeah. Did you see anything else that you saw from the offense, or any questions or follow-ups that you have before we move on to defense?
Nothing that you haven't already covered. A lot of what I was interested to hear what some of your takes were on the offensive line, because that was the one position group that I didn't really get to see too much of, because they went outside. I was upstairs where a lot of the other media was, and which is kind of a good transition into where we were at for defense.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go and you look at what I got to see,
I'm down in the field. Trev's up top because I'm doing the video, which allows me to get. So today the video I shot was running backs and O-line. So that's why we'll have some video of both of those groups later. But that's why I was outside able to watch the line, is because Trev is up top and I'm down on the field outside. So that's why we saw there's definitely different things that we're able to have access to. But are you about to go to the defense? Because I want to do just a quick transition before we do that. So before we get to the defense, folks, do me a favor. You guys see that thumbs up right below you? Go ahead and hit that once. Give us a like. We really appreciate that. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you put your notification bells on. And also make sure you are subscribed to our CFB Nation channel, because the top 5 quarterback breakdown that Sean Davis and I did on our live show on Monday, we put those videos up on we broke them up into 3 different segments. And we put those videos on the CFB Nation channel, and we got a lot more things planned with that. Not only in the YouTube version, but also the podcast version. Somebody asked us if I can't watch YouTube all the time, what do I do? If you can't watch YouTube, then that's why you need to be subscribed to our podcast platform also, in which you can find on Apple, Spotify, whoever you use for podcasts. Just type in Irish Breakdown. And if you want to get caught up on segments that maybe you missed the YouTube segment, you want to get caught up on it, you can check those out there as well. So but I mean, Trev, you know the deal, right? You know how we're going to end this thing. Folks, best way to support us, best way to be involved in all the different things we're doing, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Great, irishbreakdown.com. Great monthly rates, cheap annual rates, and we also have a booster club for people who want to help us above and beyond what we normally ask of you. And you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Trevor, you got a chance today to focus on the Notre Dame defense, and this is obviously practice 2 of the Chris Ash era for us watching the defense. And so just kind of a rundown of just the overall structure of the practice, and then we'll dive into kind of some of the things you saw from them, from the defensive line, and just kind of keep rolling through that.
Yeah, so defense is always interesting to watch at this time of the year in spring, for a lot of the reasons why it's tough to kind of gauge where the offensive line is at. It's, people aren't really going full speed that we get to see. I mean, obviously, I'm sure at other points throughout the spring, other points throughout the practice, there was more physical contact. But the stuff that I got to see today from the defense, it was a lot of still just working on specific skill sets, not necessarily one-on-ones, things of that nature. Chris Ash, I will say, he was a little bit more mobile today than what he was in the first practice that we got to see. He spent a lot of time with the linebackers in the secondary today. The first practice, he kind of just hung out with the linebackers and hung back a little bit. Today, he was a little bit more vocal, a little bit more open about what he wanted to see. It was something else that Al Washington touched on in his post-practice press conference, just talking about getting acclimated and used to how Chris Ash does things versus how Al Golden wanted to do things. So today I did see that Chris Ash was a little bit more mobile and around where he wanted to be. The first period of practice today, the edge rushers, the linebackers, and the DBs all were doing specific special teams drills paired up with each other. That was period 1. The interior D-line, they got to go outside, and they were doing some punch work with the sleds. Getting off to a good, quick first step, firing their hands, getting them inside, getting a good, quick punch. Unfortunately, where I was sitting when they would go outside based on how the walls are set up, I don't get to see a whole lot of that. And the defensive line spent 3 of the 4 periods outside today. And so what I got to see from that was limited. I got to see big picture, some of the drills that they got to do, but I didn't get to see specifically who stood out doing what, who was where, who was aligned where. Now, the common theme that I got today from the defensive line, I don't think that they were going through like depth rotations. What I mean is, I don't think that the first group that was going was the first team and the second group that was going was the second team. They were more just lining up in 4s, but it's drills that could have been done individually. So they would have the 1-man sled and they'd punch off of that, do a quick swim move, they do a quick rip, but it was just set up to where 4 people would go at a time. So then you're just not watching 19 individual players go through the same drill. For example, I mean, there was one alignment that, Sean Sevillano was like the farthest outside left guy. I did not read that as, I guess Sean Sevillano is playing strong side defensive end. It's just where they lined up to get through the drill. That was the second period for them. The third and fourth periods, they were back outside, but they spent a lot of time apart. The interior D-line, almost the entire practice was doing work on the sleds. The edge rushers were doing a little bit more one-on-one work. Couple things that I noticed, Josh Burnham, he's still working both sides. He's working the big end and the Viper position. Cole Mullins, who we've talked about on the show before, who was doing some work inside, who we thought that they were going to move to the interior permanently, he did every rep that we saw today. Now, it could have changed as practice went on, but from what we saw, he was playing on the outside. He was playing the big end position today. Now,
which confirms what I put on the depth chart, because I was told before the season, before spring, that they were going to give him a lot more work at end, Trev. And so that I'm glad to see that confirmed. And I know you and I talked about this. I like that move. He just looks more like an end than the guy. I mean, he looks like he's going to have to really add a lot of weight to play inside. He just looks more like a guy that needs to be playing on the edge, in my opinion.
He looked extremely comfortable where he was at today going through reps. Now, again, I don't have anything to compare that to. I didn't see the practices where he was on the interior, but you can
see
tell
his body,
when
though. You can see his body. Yeah.
Yes. And you can also tell when a player is just, they're more comfortable playing a certain position as opposed to when they're not. All I know is that he looked comfortable playing that big end position. Now, similar to Will Pauling, he was going through drills at like 3/4, half speed. He's still working his way back from, I think he was getting his knee cleaned up. And so he was the last one to go through drills, very similar to how they're handling Will Pauling. But in the reps that he was going through, it looked really good. And then period number 2, the entire D-line unit was inside. They were working on a quick step. And the first rotation through, they worked on getting flat down the line. And then the second one, they focused more on Al Washington was back, pretending to be the quarterback. They would rush in, get a hand up like we've seen them do in games so many times when they've gotten pressure on the quarterback. Couple things to note from that. Armel Mukum, he is a step quicker than where I believe that he was at last season. He's carrying his weight well. He's a lot more comfortable with what he's doing. And to Brian's point earlier, I don't know if it's he just got faster. I think he's just more comfortable with what he's doing. He has a better understanding of the feel for what he's being asked to do. Jason Onye, for the weight that he put on, he still looks to be moving extremely well. He was somebody that I was able to see, just like the little window that I could see out into where they were outside. You can tell that weight was put on in some good weight. It was lower body weight, but he's still able to stay low. He was firing off pretty quick. That sled pad really popped when he hit it. And so that's what I saw from the defensive line today. It was a little limited, but from what I got to see, those were some of my takeaways. Brian, with you being outside, did you see anything else?
Not a lot. I want to add this, though. The defense is working at a little bit of a different pace than the offense so far in the 2 practices we've seen. It's going to make it harder to have as many observations about the defense as what I'm giving on the offense, just because of the different things they're doing. Where we're seeing quarterbacks drop back, let her rip, receivers running full routes. We're seeing pure drill work from the defense. And a lot of times, Trev, it's not full go. There's a big emphasis on some of the technical things and some of the fundamental things that Chris Ash wants to implement. And so that just makes it a little bit challenging, just so people understand, a little bit challenging to kind of have as many takeaways from how different guys were moving compared to other guys. I will confirm, though, that Armel Mukum definitely is playing at a different pace than he did in the fall and last. We'll see around last spring. Don't remember, but definitely in the fall, because I know he was coming back from an injury, but definitely moving he looks more refined. He's massive. Looks a little bit more refined physically, but just also, I think a lot of it has to do with not that he's necessary. He may not be more athletic. He just looks more comfortable, and that's allowing him to play faster. Maybe he is more, a little bit more explosive. I shouldn't say athletic, a little bit more explosive. Another year in the weight room. But I think a lot of this with a lot of these young guys is just they know what they're doing now. I don't think Cam Hart's any faster as a human being now than he was a year ago. If he is, look out, world. It's just he knows what he's doing now.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference for a lot of these young guys. And I think Armel is an example of that. So yeah, I found that interesting. What about linebacker, Trev? What'd you see over there?
Yep. So for the linebacker drills, again, most of the defense spent the entire first period working on special teams. Now, a little bit different of a takeaway for the linebackers here because they were working on like angle blocking. You could definitely tell they were working on like individual blocks on kickoff return coverage, those type of things. Jalen Sneed is somebody that continues to stick out to me in the spring. He's somebody that put on a little bit of extra weight, good weight, but some of those questions are when you have a guy like Jalen Sneed with that kind of build, who's known for being twitchy and having a quick first step and having good sideline to sideline speed, you see a weight gain, and the immediate question is, okay, can they still play at that weight? Which he can. That was shown in this drill. They were about 10, 15 yards apart. They start on an angle, and then they cut back quickly to where the blocker is at basically the bottom of the drill waiting to take them on. Jalen Sneed, and now, again, take this with a grain of salt because they weren't in they weren't in pants. They were just in shoulder pads and a helmet. They weren't going 100% full speed, but multiple players had trouble blocking Jalen Sneed consistently. I mean, the initial pop is a little bit more, it's a little bit more noticeable than where it had been. And I think that's part of the weight gain. But the bright side for me is that he hasn't lost anything in terms of speed or quickness. That was one thing that stood out in the first drill. The second drill they were working on, they had the individual lineman sled. The linebackers would come off like they were eating up a block, punch the sled, and then Max Bola had the football, and he would throw it straight up in the air, let it bounce around. The linebacker would then have to identify where the ball was, recover the fumble, drill was over, next guy would step in. Kingston was another guy that I was keeping my eye on today. He is playing at a lighter weight. He's at 231 now. Last season, he was above 240. And he is one of those guys that I do, based on the weight loss, the good weight loss, I think that he has gotten a step quicker. He is more comfortable with what he was doing. He's somebody last year that played well over 300 snaps and played in every postseason game outside of the Indiana game because he was still working back from injury. But he's somebody that I think, on top of defensive drills being a little bit more clear, this is now, I believe, his second spring, because it was Kingston an early enrollee. Okay. So, yeah, this is Kingston's second spring. So on top of being more comfortable, I think him getting rid of some of that weight, because it wasn't a drastic weight loss, but him now playing at 231, I think he's a step quicker. So in that drill, he's somebody that I noticed of like, okay, this guy is moving a little bit different today from what we got to see. And then same thing with some of the other linebackers. Look, guys like Drake Bowen, we've been talking about him a lot. I think he's poised to have a big season. He is similar to what Brian was talking about with Kenny and with CJ. He's carrying himself a little bit different, which is something that we got to see in the final period today. I'll touch more on that when we get to the defensive backs. But for the final period of the day, the linebackers and the defensive backs were working together. It was almost like a 7-on-7 setup, but really heavy. And they weren't partnered with the offense. I think they had like some special teams guys just like going out and running routes, but it was to help with defensive communication. It was to help with talk about switching underneath routes, getting people acclimated. And Drake Bowen and Adon Schuler, like we had thought that they would be, were very vocal carrying themselves a little different. Linebacker room, especially because they don't have that Jack Kaiser type of guy in there, that 5th-year, 6th-year senior that's seen it all, done it all, been around it all. Drake is starting to step in those shoes, and you're starting to see it a little bit. He's a lot more vocal, carries himself a little bit differently. After he goes through his drill, he's helping point out some things to some guys. Hey, maybe you should try this. Hey, this is how I would approach this. You could tell that he was starting to wear that coach's hat a little bit on top of still performing at a high level himself for the drills that they were doing. So for me, those were my biggest takeaways from linebackers. And then again, I said this after the first defensive practice report, but man, Madden Framo that guy's going to be fun to watch for years to come in South Bend because he flies, man. You saw it in the special teams drill. He was another player that some players had trouble blocking, but it's just because he's fast. He has strength to him, but he's going to naturally get stronger as he continues to go through a college weight training program. But man, that guy is twitchy. He is quick. He can get off of blocks quickly. He moves a little bit different than some of the other guys in that room. I'll say that for sure.
That linebacker room is fun to watch. Just practice.
Man.
You're talented when practice is fun to watch, when drills are fun to watch. And that's what I love about the running backs. And it's just fun to watch the running backs go through drills because you're like, dude, that's what big-time football is supposed to look like. It's fun to watch the offensive linemen go through drills and get out of your – look, there's a lot of takes on because this guy's playing guard, not tackle. That means this and this. And it may, and there's other time. Well, that conversation will be there for another time. It's not relevant to a practice report based on what we saw today. It could mean something. I have my concerns, but it's just like timing is a little bit different. But take that aside. You're like, dude, this is what a big-time offensive line is supposed to look like. Like 6'6", 6'7", 320, 330. Billy Shrout is the small guy at 6'5", 310. He was 315 last year, of the returners. And it's like, this is like athletic and long. And you're like, this is what it's supposed to look like. And I could only the linebackers or D-line was like on the opposite side of the field from where I was and just working on different things. But linebackers, I got the chance to see a little bit of, and it's like, this is what a big-time linebacker room is supposed to look like in today's football. It really is. I feel the same way about the secondary. I'm like, dude, Bronte Johnson might be the 5th or 6th tallest DB on the roster. And it's between him and Leonard Moore. You know what I mean? You're just like, this is ridiculous. Just the length on this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what it's supposed to look like. It's exciting.
Yeah. Exciting. Yeah. The secondary was something really fun to watch today too. And I had personal bias. I know as an analyst, we evaluate everything. All cards are on the table. For me, I love watching secondary play. I really do, especially now with where Notre Dame secondary is at, because you're looking and there's just talent littered all throughout. You're looking at the DBs and you're watching Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Carson Hobbs and Cree Thomas. They're all going through drills. You look at the safety room and Adon Schuler's leading the charge, but then you have guys like Luke Talich and Jadon Blair and Kennedy Erlock and Bronte Johnson and all these guys. It's really, really exciting. For me, biggest thing, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. They went through the same special teams drill in period 1 that the rest of the defense went through. The next couple of periods 2 and 3, the second one, they were all together. They were working on punch outs, and this was a 3-man drill where they had a ball carrier and a tackler who was meant to punch the ball out. And then Marty Biaggi hung back in the third line and would release the third player to then go and recover the fumble. And then the tackler turned into a blocker. There's a common theme that I'm starting to see with a lot of these individual drills. There is still a heavy emphasis of see ball, get ball. Multiple of the drills that we've seen now in 2 practices have been around attacking the football, punching it out, ripping it out, tracking it well. But period 2 was spent a lot of time doing that. The third period was really cool to see. The safeties went outside, I think, for a brief moment to do some work. So it was just the corners in. The corners during that time were just running through literally their pregame warm-up. They were backpedaling for 5 yards. They would explode forward, catch the football. Nothing new there. However, off to the side was Devontae Smith and Ben Minnick, who Ben Minnick has now recently moved to playing nickel. and he was doing a lot of work with Devontae Smith there. Couple of takeaways here. One, I believe they were working with one of the defensive back analysts, and they were doing a couple of drills.
It was a shorter guy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that might be Coach Codlin.
Okay. They were doing some drills with him, very specific to slot corner work. They were doing a lot of underneath stuff, which hip to attack, how to attack the outside shoulder, where you go and you make your contact, tracking the ball on things like slot fades. First and foremost, Devontae Smith is going to do some good things for Notre Dame's defense this year. He's a very smooth athlete. He flips his hips really well. He tracks the ball well. He honestly catches the ball really well, too. Sometimes DBs, their hands can be a little tight. You can kind of hear it when they catch it, like that, like not stone hands, but like it's louder. It's a louder impact when they catch the ball sometimes. Devontae Smith has very soft hands for a DB. Now, he's not going up and, making OBJ one-handed behind the head catches, but for where he's playing at, very smooth athlete, very quick hips, and he has really soft hands. Ben Minnick spent a lot of time listening to what both Devontae Smith and probably Coach Codlin were telling him, teaching, because he is learning a new position. He's transitioning from safety to slot corner. And so he was like a sponge, man. He was drinking out of a fire hose. He was taking in as much information as he possibly could. But he was able to immediately apply it. He was still a little like robotic going through the drills. You could tell he was still really thinking, but Ben Minnick is fast. I didn't realize how fast he was.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Yeah. That hasn't been a question since he got here. The one thing he can do is run.
Yeah, I did not know that he had speed like that. And it was one of those where hips were a little tight. Yeah, like if he was still playing safety, I don't think my takeaway would have been like, yeah, he has tight hips. But now that he's down closer to line of scrimmage, playing slot corner a little bit, I notice it a little bit more. But man, once he does get those hips flipped and he's able to get vertical, he can move. And so with being tutored under a guy like Devontae Smith, and also being in a room with Mike Mickens is going to help any young defensive back in the country. Firmly believe that. I think Ben Minnick is going to grow into something really good here in South Bend, but that was my takeaway from their third period. The final period, they were doing like a 7-on-7 defensive shell, like I mentioned when I was talking about the linebackers. This was on defense the only time that I saw that they were doing a true, like first team rotation, second team rotation. Everything else was just very drill based, like hop in line. Now, of course, when the DBs were going through individual drills, the first two guys through the line were Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, followed by Carson Hobbs, and then everybody fell in line. But this was, as a unit, the first time that I got to see we got to put a first team out there. Who is it? Obviously, the corners were Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. Devontae Smith was lined up in the nickel. The two linebackers that they had out there were Kingston and Drake, which is just something that I've wanted to see kind of from a fan standpoint of like, man, can you imagine those two on the field together? Well, they were. Those two guys were out on the field together. And then, the starting safety tandem that was out there to start was Luke Talich and Adon Schuler. Adon was still playing the boundary. Talich was still playing the field, or was playing the field. And then when the second team rotated in, that's when we saw Carson Hobbs come in. That's when we saw Ben Minnick take a couple reps at slot corner. And then at safety, that's when we saw Bronte Johnson and Kennedy Urlacher in there. And so that is what they were running through. Like I mentioned, when I was running through the linebackers, a lot of it was just good communication on switching on under routes. That is a lot of what that period was. And then safeties communicating on the back end for anything that leaked out. But for me as a whole, that's what we saw on defense today. Like Brian said, like I said, it's a different speed right now in the spring, because you're not going to see people going at right now, at least in the periods that we saw, going 100% full go, doing tackling drills, things like that. And so those are some of the defensive observations. So Brian, anything to add? Any questions from what happened today on defense?
Yeah, and I'm going to say this the right way without giving away too much and getting in trouble. They're going to look a lot different structurally next year in some ways defensively, especially in the secondary. So that'll be interesting to see. Very interesting to see. So, but yeah, man, that's good. I mean, I think that's a good report, and it's fun to be out there. We didn't see any kicking yet. We haven't seen any kicking yet this spring. So can't give Vince his fix of kicker knowledge. Sorry, man. But that's it. Look, we're going to get to the buy, sell, hold next, everybody. But before we get going, Trev, great report. Trev, also, our reports are also on the message board. We always put them there first, and then eventually they'll go up on the front page. And then, of course, we talk about them here. But the message board is always where you get it first. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Make sure you hit that like button, too, before we get on over here to the buy, sell, hold. But thanks for joining us for part one, which was a recap of Notre Dame's second available spring practice of the 2025 season. So Trevor Trowbridge, man, it is time for buy, sell, hold. Y'all know the drill. These are submissions that are made by Champions Lounge members. So if you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, we have Salty will put a thread up every Monday or Tuesday, and this is for board members only. So if you are a member of the Irish Breakdown message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, you can obviously post these suggestions or post your submissions for buy, sell, hold. If you want to get something up today and you didn't put it into the thread, you can always just throw a super chat in there. But as I always say, if you're not a board member and you're going to throw a super chat to get your buy, sell, hold up in there, I think you'd be better off putting that towards a membership, and then you can get a lot more. I'm just saying, it's just bang for your buck. Spend $5 on a super chat or more for today's show, or use that to buy a membership for at least a month, and I think you're going to like it more, and then you get 4. So there you go. I'm just trying to help you all out with a little bit of business deal. But that's how we roll today, Trev. Not a Q&A, just more of a submissions, and then we kind of do, are we buying it? Yep, I'm on board with that submission. I'm selling that. I don't think that's going to be, or a hold for whatever reason. I'm just not sure if I have enough data for that. I don't really have an opinion on that. I'm torn on that. You can always pick a hold. We try not to do holds a lot, but there's a time and a place where those are appropriate. So that's what we're going to do. But without further ado, Trevor, I am ready to rock and roll on today's buy, sell, hold.
As always, pretty fitting that our guy Salty Virginia Peanuts is going to get us kicked off today because he's the one that puts us together on the board. So
it's one of the perks, you know what I mean, for being the one that puts it together. You get to go first.
Oh, yeah. So buy, sell, hold from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Compared to the low point of opinions on Coach Washington, at the time of the Justin Scott events, he has made major advances in his efforts and effectiveness. This recruiting class, if it holds steady on all priority targets, will confirm that recruiting concerns are now strengths for him.
I mean, he's on the way there, right? I mean, I think that he's done a lot of good things from a coaching standpoint. I don't know that anyone can really deny that now. The recruiting standpoint, I mean, it's been solid the last 2 years to good. The board he's put together for this season, for this class, I should say, right now is really impressive. Like, really impressive. Now the question is, okay, can he close? Because right now there's no D linemen that have made public commitments to Notre Dame. Can he close? And I do think the nature of the board, how impressive it is to me. Somebody asked me on the premium lounge last night, the Champions Lounge last night, and he listed off 5 guys. And he said, if they land these 5, would that be a gap closing class? And I'm like, oh yeah, big time. And but again, it's always comes down to closing. And that's going to be the key. But yeah, I'm going to buy that by the end of this process, people are going to look back and be like, yeah, boy, Al Washington's become a pretty darn good recruiter for Notre Dame. And I do think that'll be the takeaway that people have from the recruiting efforts he's really made and what we've seen and just the work that he's put in for the cycle. And look, it's not just about an impressive board. It's also about talking to prospects in the 26 and 27 classes. How many more kids now talk about how much he talks to them, how strong the relationship is and all that. And it's just the work being put in is really strong. So I'm buying that one. I'm definitely buying that one.
Yeah, I'm with that. I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold from Brother Thomas. Rodney Dunham is a lock to sign with the Irish.
I mean, I'm selling that right now on March 26th. I don't have anybody down as a lock to sign. I mean, just the nature of the beast right now. And the other thing, too, is Rodney Dunham is not publicly committed to Notre Dame. I mean, he announced yesterday. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago? Or was it yesterday? No, it was 2 days ago. He announced 2 days ago that he's going to make his commitment known on the 10th of April. But I mean, right now it's like I'm just going to kind of sit back and relax and see how that one plays out. And I put a couple little comments on the board about this, but we're going to see how it plays out. But look, if Rodney Dunham came out today and was like, called me up, which I don't know how you do because he doesn't have my number, and he's like, hey man, I want to come on the show right now and commit to Notre Dame. I'm like, cool, bud, let's get you on the show and let's have you commit. I'd still say, okay. It's March 26th. Signing day is not till December.
Yeah.
That's just where recruiting is now. And that's not an indictment on Rodney Dunham. It's not an indictment on Noah Grubbs or Dylan Faison or Ben Nichols or Slow. I mean, the only kid that I would be like shocked if he doesn't sign with Notre Dame, like just floored. All the linemen, but especially Sullivan Garvin. Like that would be the one more than any of the others. I'd be like shocked. I'd be more shocked if Dylan Faison went somewhere else than I would if Sullivan Garvin went somewhere else. But with the exception of maybe the offensive lineman, maybe Dylan Faison, I mean, all these kids you're going to have to keep working on. You're going to have to keep working to keep Thomas Davis Jr. in class. You're going to have to keep working to keep Chaz Smith in class. I think Noah Grubbs is pretty sound, but again, who knows? I mean, who knows at this point in time? In March of his I'd say, maybe around this time of his going to senior year, I still felt pretty good about Keon Keeley still signing with the Irish and how'd that work out. So it's, it's a process. And so I'm not buying anyone being a lock to sign when we're basically 8.5 months away from signing day, not in the modern era. And again, that's not an indictment on any of those young men, but it's just the nature of the beast for right now, Trev.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. I mean, look, might be the way that I look at it is nobody's a lock until they're locked in, I guess. Until after signing day, I can't say that anybody's going to be a lock to sign. So I'm with you there. I get that completely. Day and age of where college football is at right now, whether you like it or not, that's the reality that we live in. So agreed. Buy, sell, hold. After our family visit in October for the Boise State game, my daughter will be so impressed with the school and campus that she will commit to Notre Dame and not enter the transfer portal at any time.
Brother Thomas, you're asking me to give a buy, sell, hold about your daughter. Buy. Sure. Sounds exciting to me. Sounds like she's got some positive influences at home, Trevor, trying to help convince her of this. So, yeah, sure. I'm buying it, brother. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, your daughter's a lot. Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
I dig it. I am looking forward to that game, though, because I don't know. I've always kind of had a special place in my heart for Boise State, even going all the way back to the Dan Hawkins days. Like I've always liked Boise State as a program, so it'll be cool to see Notre Dame and Boise State play each other. It really will.
Yeah. Yep. Especially after the season that they just had, too.
Yes. They're both playoff teams.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Buy, sell, hold from Balpine Shillelagh. Buy, sell, or hold each of the rooms as being the most critical in getting back to the national championship. You can only buy 3. You can hold or sell on the rest as you'd like. All righty. So essentially all of the position rooms that Notre Dame has. Quarterback, we can go one by one here, Brian. So buy, sell, hold the quarterback room.
I kind of want to think through these. So basically what he's saying is So he listed quarterback, O-line, receivers, running backs, linebackers, D-line, secondary, and then the great one. I mean, look, 8 and 3 are going to go together, so just put those together. But basically what he's asking is, are we going to buy, sell, hold each is the most critical in getting back? So it's not that any of these are like not critical, but I can only buy 3 of them. Hold or sell. Like, okay, I'm not selling any position because all these positions are critical to getting back to the championship. So I don't know that there's a position where you're like, yeah, that position doesn't matter. But I do think there's varying degrees of greatness or that can impact a team positively. So if I can only buy 3 of those, the 3 that I would buy is 1 quarterback, 2 offensive line, 3 defensive line. Those are the 3 that I would take. So 1, 2, and 6. Now, again, they're all important, but of the ones that have to play at a high level for this Notre Dame team to get there, like, and here's where some of my thinking is. Well, running back and secondary is not important. They're already playing at a high level, so I don't need them to change anything. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. The running back room's already elite. Secondary is already elite. Okay, linebackers. Again, if you just repeat what you did last year, we're fine. Receivers, that one was a challenge, but again, I think the receivers played a lot better than people give them credit for last season, and I've said that for several seasons. And at the end of the day, I feel like if the O-line and quarterback do their jobs, the receiver play is going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
So it comes down, whereas if the receivers play really well, but the quarterback's not getting them the football, or the offensive line can't protect the quarterback, then they can't be impactful. So these are also the 3 most, like, linebackers could be really talented, but if the defensive line's not playing at a high level, then the linebackers won't be as effective. The secondary could be elite, but if the D line's not getting pressure on the quarterback or not having success on downs 1 and 2, then I don't care how good your secondary is, you're gonna have some problems because you're having to cover all day. So I think the other part of reason why it's 1, 2, and 6 is because those positions impact everybody else way more then the other positions will impact those. And so that's ultimately why I'm going to go in that direction with those 1, 2, and 6. Quarterback, O-line, D-line.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of differing opinions here. 2 and 6 for sure, offensive and defensive line. I do like, Ballpeen, that you said to get back to, because I do think that makes for a more interesting conversation than like getting over the hump and actually winning the national championship game. I do think that I also agree that I think quarterback, I'm buying that as being a very important ingredient. I will say this, though. With the quarterback position, it is interesting that we're starting to see a string of quarterbacks win national championships or get to the national championship game that aren't necessarily like the elite of the elite quarterbacks. Like when you talk about elite quarterbacks in college football from the 2024 season, people are going to talk about, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Some people might, based on how he ended the year. Yeah, I've seen some people put Cade Klubnik in that conversation. The list goes on. But the common thing between like a Shedeur and a Cam Ward is, they both didn't even make the playoffs. And then you go back through history and you start looking, and I mean recent history, the quarterbacks that have won national championships, Will Howard, Stetson Bennett, J.J. McCarthy. These are guys that are not world beaters, light the world on fire type of guys. They're not Joe Burrow. They're not Deshaun Watson. They're not Tua. They're not, heck, even Mac Jones from the season that he had in 2020. And so quarterback would be the one position where I would entertain, okay, maybe it's not the absolute necessity, but for everything that they're in charge of, I'm absolutely including it with my offensive and defensive line. But also you look at Notre Dame's season last year, and they won their first major bowl win in 31 years by passing for 80 yards or 90 yards. Now, caveat to my own point is then their quarterback also led the team in rushing. And so difference there, the quarterback is still important, but for those reasons, definitely offensive and defensive line, quarterback in there, absolutely. And then I'm with you on the rest of it, Brian.
Good. I like it when we're on the same page. All right. Good submission.
Buy, sell, hold from Greg Nielsen. In the current NIL era, it will be much harder for schools to field both elite football and basketball teams.
I'm going to sell that it'll be much harder. I don't think that it'll be, I mean, you could say harder, sure. The only reason it's harder is because it costs more money. But if you're winning at both, you're going to bring in more money. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Basketball's
it depends on the school.
sure.
But like I say, it's much harder for UConn to be really good at both. I don't think it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to necessarily be better at both. I don't think it's going to be hard for, I mean, Alabama's, is a team that's pretty good in football, and they're in the Sweet 16, and and so no, I think the issue is going to be like, okay, well, some schools just aren't going to spend money on football, and they're going to try to get good at basketball. And then others are going to do the same. And there's going to be some truth to that. It's really hard to know for sure, Trev, because part of this too is we haven't seen the rev share kick in yet. Like Michigan's football team won the championship last year, and their basketball team's in the Sweet 16 right now. Alabama's football team was in the playoffs, the 14 playoff last year, and this year they're in the Sweet 16. So I mean, we're seeing it. Some schools don't want it. I mean, BYU is really good at football this year, and their basketball teams in the Sweet 16. So, yeah, I mean, we're seeing it. Florida's was number one seed, and their football team is spending money. So I think that there's plenty of teams. Ole Miss is in the Sweet 16. They were also a 10-win team this past year. Tennessee's a 2 seed. They're in the Sweet 16. Their football team was in the college football playoff this year. I think they're the only team that was in the playoff and also made the Sweet 16. This year, BYU, Bama, Maryland, Florida, Arizona, Duke, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Michigan, Auburn, Ole Miss, Michigan State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Purdue, Houston. Yeah, Tennessee's the only team. Men's team is the only team that was in the college football playoff and also made the basketball Sweet 16. And I'm curious. Let me see here. In Tennessee's women's team is also in the Sweet 16. So, and then if you look at the other sports, obviously men's basketball is one, but if you look at on the women's side, Ole Miss is another team that is their men and women are in both Sweet 16s. Maryland's men and women are in both the Sweet 16s, but if Duke is in the both Sweet 16s. But if you look at like Notre Dame's football team was, but the Notre Dame women's basketball team was also in the Sweet 16 in women's basketball. And then, as I mentioned, Tennessee's in all three, and then Texas was in the college football playoff, and then is also in the Sweet 16 on the women's side. So there's three teams that made the college football playoffs this year, and also have a basketball program, either men's or women's, in the Sweet 16. Will that change because I think we need to get rid of the current NIL era, because I think it's going to change when the rev share thing starts. That's when I think things could get more challenging, and I don't really know how that's going to go, to be completely honest with you. I really don't know how that's going to go. But I think it'll be harder for some schools. It won't be harder for others. The schools with the big budgets are going to go back to dominating again, in my opinion. But, yeah.
I think it also, agree with everything that you said. I think it also depends on what your definition of elite is. Yeah, like, are you talking about it's going to be harder for teams to reach the semifinals of the college football playoff and the Final Four? Yeah, is that considered elite? Because that rarely happens now. Like, as is. That's always been extremely difficult. I think it depends from school to school. Brian, you brought up UConn. I think of other teams like a Kentucky. They've always been a basketball powerhouse, not necessarily known for football. It's just different standards. A good season for Kentucky football is they get 9 wins. A good season for Kentucky basketball is they're in the Final Four, based on the track record of the, last decade and a half. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it just all kind of depends on which school you're talking about. Sure.
And we haven't seen a lot of those anyway, Trev. We haven't seen a lot of years where there's a bunch of different teams that are elite in both sports. I mean, we'll see it at times, but it's not often, because different schools are going to support certain programs differently. I mean, UConn is never going to be in an elite football program. Never have been, never will be. I think they won maybe they had some success at the FCS level, but I mean, they're never going to be good there. UConn won back-to-back national championships in men's basketball the last 2 years. Their women's basketball team is probably the most storied ever in the history of women's basketball, and their football team has always been very mediocre to bad.
Yep.
It's just a different animal. I mean, it's just some sports that was always going to be true, and that's not going to change a whole lot. But other teams like Michigan is a team that's in the last 10 to 12 years has won a championship in football, been in the Final Four, also in basketball. We've seen different times when Texas was good in both. We've seen different times when other schools were good at both. I mean, it's just the SEC is getting better at basketball. Obviously, got 14 teams getting in this year. But is Kentucky ever going to be a powerhouse in football? No, never have been. I don't know that they ever will be. So I don't, Arkansas, they've had some years here and there in football, but they've always been considered more of a basketball school. So, I mean, that's going to be part of it too.
Oh yeah. And then in the rare occasions you're kind of seeing the changing of the guard too, a little bit, like schools like IU. I mean, IU's football program just had more success than what their basketball team has had in 15 years. I mean, making the playoffs as IU football, it's impressive. And so you have some of those rare schools that are kind of starting to take that over a little bit, starting to change the trajectory of their athletic program as a whole. It's interesting. Definitely interesting. Buy, sell, hold again from Greg Nielsen. Kennedy Urlacher has the overall speed and athleticism to not be a liability in passing situations at the safety position.
Buy. That's always been a buy. It's never been about speed and athleticism. It's always been about mentality and mindset. I mean, Tom Zbikowski is a pretty athletic guy. The reason he was bad in coverage is because he wanted to come down and lay somebody out.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to bite down and lay somebody out. It's not that he wasn't athletic. Go watch him return a punt.
Right.
It was mentality, and that's Kennedy Urlacher's. That's the question with him. It's never for me been about athleticism ever.
Yep, I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold. Stanford GM Andrew Luck apparently made the decision to fire Troy Taylor. So, buy, sell, hold. Over the next 5 years, more head football coaches will be reporting to their school's GM rather than the other way around.
I'm going to hold on that for now. First of all, so we're clear on this particular circumstance. The reason that Andrew Luck made that decision is because right now Stanford doesn't have an athletic director. Bernard Meir, their athletic director, resigned. So they don't have an athletic director. So Andrew Luck sort of took on that role because they didn't have anybody else to make that decision. And there was an ongoing investigation that led to certain allegations. You know what I mean? So it's not like Andrew Luck just decided he's unhappy with back-to-back 3 and 9s. So he's going to fire Troy Taylor. Now, if Stanford was 10-2 this past year, do they fire their coach? Probably not. Let's be honest about that. But when you treat people poorly, which is the allegations against Troy Taylor, and you lose, you're going to lose your job because now you have cause to fire a guy and not have to pay his buyout because there's now cause. So this is a bit of a unique situation where an investigation was concluded at a time when they don't have an athletic director hired. So who's going to make that decision? That decision was given to Andrew Luck. There will be some coaches who will want to give up control to the GM and have to, quote unquote, report to the GM because they don't want to have to take on certain responsibilities and certain pressures. I tend to lean more towards sell because I have a hard time believing that most really good head coaches are going to want to give up control of their program to somebody else. I have a hard time with that. I don't ever see Marcus Freeman being like, okay, I have to report to my GM now. Or Kirby Smart or Dabo or Ryan Day or Kalen DeBoer. I have a hard time believing that those guys are definitely going to want to report to a GM. Now, the thing is, you could start to see GMs replace the athletic directors, and then that's a different animal. But the way that the GM is structured now, We can't look at it the same way we do in the NFL, because in the NFL, they are the highest up the food chain outside of presidents and owners. But when it comes to football decisions, they are the top of the totem pole. In college, they still have bosses like the AD. So it's just a different animal. So I don't view it that way yet. It's possible, and I think there will be some coaches who want to take that burden off their shoulders. But I think the best coaches are guys that are going to want to still be in control of everything. That's kind of where I'm at. So I'm good, but I'm still going to hold it because I just don't know where this is going to go. But I think most top coaches will want to will not want that. So, but you said more. Well, right now there's one, and that was Stanford. Now, the other part of this is my understanding is when Andrew Luck was hired, it was in a way where the head coach was going to have to report to him. So it was a unique structure, but I don't know that Andrew Luck would have necessarily had firing power if there was an AD, even as him being someone who the head coach has to report to. Will it happen more than the ones that it's happening now? Probably. I just don't know how much more, and I don't think it's going to be a lot more. Where I could see it happening, Trev, is in the group of 5 level, where you tend to have a lot more turnover at the coaching level from year to year. That I could see like more MAC schools doing it to try to help with continuity, things like that. I could see that.
Sure.
I just don't see it happening at the Big Ten. Like I just don't see it happening at the Big Ten level, the way that it's happening at Stanford. I have a hard time seeing that.
Yeah, in today's state, I'm going to say sell for a lot of the reasons that you said. The GM at the NFL level, like they have to sit down and negotiate contracts. Like the entire construct of a team's roster is mainly attributed to the GM. They almost always get the final say on draft day. They're the ones most of the time that make the phone call to the players that they're drafting. Then afterwards, they put on the head coach. Now, another facet of this is NIL with revenue sharing. Who knows? Because the GM, the reason why I like the hire of Mike Martin at Notre Dame is because he has that NFL background. There's going to be a little bit more, I think, roster maintenance, being more proactive instead of reactive. But again, I think all of that is going to be under the head coach's guidance. But in today's state, I'm going to sell it because the only example that we have of this happening is kind of an extenuating circumstance. It's happening at a school where there's an active investigation going on, also at a place that doesn't have a current athletic director.
And a place that doesn't really give a crap about athletics in the way that we do.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Let's be honest about that. Stanford's a bit of a different animal.
Yep. Buy, sell, hold from B-Jam and 41. Freeman and Geno should have offered their top quarterback targets earlier and not have waited until May.
I'll buy that. I mean, I understand the process they're going through. I just think they should have sped it up more. Every other coach on the staff can evaluate players, but Gino Guidugli can't. He's got the smallest board on the planet, or on the staff. Quite hyperbolic. You can't evaluate that many. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I got to see him throw live. Look, offer him so you know, hey, you're my top guy. We're going to offer you, but look, we're not going to take a commitment till we get you guys all on campus and do this and do that. That's fine. But I'm gonna buy that they should have done it sooner. Just because you don't offer a guy, just because you offer a guy doesn't mean you need to take a commitment. You could tell all these kids, look, and I would even tie it into visiting. Hey, if you get up here and visit for the spring, then we'll talk about an offer. And then, like, I would have offered the Jamison Purcell kid when he visited. I would have offered Trey Taylor when he visited. I'd offer Peter Bork when he visits. I would have offered Malachi Ziegler next week when he visits. Tie it into them visiting, because if they don't want to visit, then you're not going to get them anyway. And then just tell them you're going to be there face to face with them. Look, this is where we're at. You're one of our dudes, but we just want to do our due diligence, and we want to get out and see everybody and make a decision then. But the way they're doing it now, it's almost like you're treating this job like it's the biggest job in all of sports. And while that might have been true at some point in time, that's not true right now. Might change again, but right now it's like, dude, with all due respect, You want me to wait for you when I can go over here and play for this guy who actually puts quarterbacks in the NFL? All right. Yeah. Pass. So I worry about that.
Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will flip either running back Messiah Mickens and or running back Cameron Spell from Penn State.
I should have checked that. It's actually Keemon. But yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that they'll get one of them. I'm not like buying it with great conviction, but as of right now, I think there's a good chance that one of those two guys they'll be able to get. Yeah, I'll buy that.
Fair enough. Buy, sell, hold. Eli Raridan will have more touchdowns this year than Mitchell Evans, 5, had his whole career. He will get 4 touchdowns in the regular season and 2 more touchdowns in the playoffs.
Well, I'm not going to buy or sell or hold this based on your 4-2 thing. I will go with the first part. I'll buy that. I'll be shocked if Eli Raridan doesn't have more than 5 touchdown receptions this year. Yeah. I think he's a much better red zone weapon, not just because he's 2 inches taller than Mitchell Evans, but just he has a little bit of a more unique skill set that I think makes him more prone to having success in the red zone. On top, not including the length and all that, but also he's a much better blocker. So it's more believable when he's blocking someone near the goal line that you may get him on a leak out or something. So I think with Mitchell Evans, you're almost like, okay, dude, you're not really blocking me. So like, be serious.
Yeah.
You're about to do a play action because you're not going to really block me. So yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah, this is a definite buy for me. He had 2 this year as the number 2 guy. And so now as the number 1 guy, he has to have 4 more over the course of an entire season with a more pass-willing offense. Yeah, that's a buy. Definite buy for me. Buy, sell, hold. Overall, this is the fastest Notre Dame team, wait for it, ever.
All right. Looking at B. Jammin's picture on he has his picture as his avatar. He looks a lot closer to your age than my age, which means he didn't get to watch the 1988 team play. I'd still probably argue that's probably the fastest team I've seen. And not just because of Rocket, but I mean, you had Rocket and Ricky Waters playing receiver. You had Pat Terrell. You had Stance Magala who could fly, Todd Light, like that. You had, I think, five running backs on the team got drafted. And they were so loaded at running back that Ricky Waters, who rushed for 10,000 yards in the NFL, had to play receiver in 1988. Tony Fisher, Tony Brooks on the team, like that was in there. And the 2015 team was freaking fast. And the thing that the 2025 team has over the 2015 team is the depth of speed. But what this team doesn't have is a Will Fuller, a Jalen Smith.
Yeah.
That's the difference. But I'll say this, B-Jamp, you're not nuts for thinking that. It's in the conversation. But between 2015 and 1988, like, pick a team with Rocket Ismail on it, and you're going to be like, maybe you go with 89. Oh, and I forgot to mention Tony Rice at quarterback, who was an incredibly dynamic athlete. But you could even maybe go 89 team, Trev, and say the 89 team was even faster because of, bringing in some new big-time recruits after winning the title. Because back then, if you won the title, you could have an even bigger impact on your recruiting class because most recruiting back then happened after the season. Like, as far as, like, the signing. Like, there was this mad dash to signing day back then in February. And that's where most of your commitments for the big-time players would happen, was late in the process. So it's far more chaotic signing days back then, which made it a lot more fun, to be completely honest with you. Like signing day now is so boring. But, like, I'd have to go back to 88, 89. I mean, Michael Stonebreaker was really athletic for a linebacker. Andre Jones was an athletic guy. Like, yeah, that was a really athletic team. The 88, 89 teams were really athletic. But when you've got Ricky Waters and Rocket Ismail and Anthony Johnson and Tony Rice, and then you got some dudes that can run. And then again, Will Fuller, Amir Carlisle, Chris Brown, CJ Prosise, that was your skill. Torrey Hunter, that was your skill in 15. Top to bottom, I think it has a chance to be that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody just asked, does Rocket beat Jeremiah Love in a race? By a mile. Bro, Rocket Ismail ran a 4.2. That's not legend. That was like he ran a 4.2. Like that guy, Jeremiah Love's a 4.4. Like Rocket Ismail would beat Will Fuller by a couple steps. Like he was the most explosive player I've ever seen. And he was a contemporary of Deion Sanders, who also allegedly ran a 4.2. And I don't know that anybody would have thought that Deion was faster than Rocket back then. Like, put it to like this. Rocket made big plays against Miami. Like, that's it. Like, Rocket was the fastest player I've ever seen in my life. That nickname was very well earned. Very well earned.
Fair enough. Yeah, this is tough because, again, like you said, in my lifetime, I've seen old footage. I never got to watch it live in context with the times. So I mean, I take your word for it, obviously, that the 88 team was like that. I just can't be like, oh, it's the 88 team. For me, it's going to take a lot to dethrone that 2015 team because that's one that I can confidently say in my lifetime is probably the fastest that I've seen. Now, top to bottom, I will say, because you start breaking down who the corners were in 2015. Kavari Russell had wheels. Cole Luke was a really good athlete. But then you got guys on this team where like Carson Hobbs might be one of the fastest players on the team, and he's struggling to get on the field.
And he's not even their fastest corner.
Yeah.
He might not even be their second fastest corner.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the
and
linebacking.
He would have been the fastest corner on a lot of Notre Dame rosters in the last 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Except ones with Troy Pride on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because Troy Pride ran a disappointing 40 time compared to what everybody, and he ran a 4.4 flat. And everybody's like, man, I thought he was faster than that. I'm like, that's freaking smoking. And everyone's bummed by it, including Troy. But he can move. He can move.
Yep.
But his counterpart ran a 4.58 or 4.54. That's the difference.
Yep.
This is a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to hear from some of the older folks, some of the people that are closer to my age. Like, how do you stack up this team to some of those late 80s, early 90s Holtz teams? I'd be very curious to see that. Very curious to see that. But yeah, I would encourage you young people. And it's hard to tell too because it's VHS and it's like really crappy video. But like there's a couple really good. I may look for one while we're talking, Trev. I may look for one of the good ones and try to put it on. I'll put it in the chat. But just some of the stuff from Rocket Ismail is impressive. But some of the video is just really bad quality. Yeah. So I'll have to try to find one that's good quality of his highlights and I'll put it on the board. But he was special.
Yeah. Quick plug too. It also helps that I'm at his house. But my dad on his YouTube channel put together basically multiple playlists of from the 70s up until this past season of every Notre Dame game that's in there. And he was able to find some good, those are the 88, 89, 93 games that I've seen. He's been finding them all around, and he's been uploading some good quality ones. So find them on YouTube, and those are some good quality videos. That I just watched the 88. The last time I was here, we watched the 88 Michigan State game. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Love it.
Buy, sell, hold from Isaiah Lehman. The 2027 class will be the best for Notre Dame in the 21st century.
I'm going to hold on that, Isaiah. It's way too early for that for me. Way too early. They don't have a single commitment in that class. I will say this, however. The early board is built in a way where they have a chance to do that. Where in other years, you're like, the board's not good enough. If they land on 90% of their top targets, the board's still not good enough for me to say it's the best of the century, which goes back to 2000, over 25 years. It's hard for me to say that. But I do think this early board, depending on how it goes, has a chance for it to become that. Yes. Like the offensive line class is impressive. The defensive line class is special. The receiver board's really impressive. The running back board's really impressive. The linebacker board's really impressive. The defensive back board is really impressive. Like it's a really impressive board. It's just they haven't got a commit from anybody. So it's too early to tell, Isaiah. But I'll say this: like sometimes a question gets asked, I'm like, what? Are you seriously asking that question? Like that's a nutty, like the best of the last 25. But Isaiah, this is a very fair early suggestion. It's just too early for me to buy or sell it. Like, but if I thought it was come on, dude, the best of the 21st century, I'd be like, sell. I'm not selling it. That's not an option. I think the early board is really outstanding, but we're a long way away from that. We might be months away from even the first commitment in the 2027 class. It's not a given. They may get a couple guys here and there, but a lot of the big time commits won't be committing until the fall and then into the winter and next spring. This is way too early for that, but the early board is really impressive. Really impressive.
By so hold, Notre Dame's wide receiver core will finish the season as one of the 10 best groups.
I want you to answer this one first, Trevor.
I'm going to be honest, and this is also starting to evaluate because I'm starting to dip into looking at what other teams have across the country as well. I'm going to buy this because I am.
Okay, keep going. I want to hear this.
Contrary to some of the other years, Notre Dame brings back and has brought in more proven talent than what they have in previous years. And this is coming from somebody who has very much been on the I need to see it train. And I still do.
That's where my reaction came from, because you've been hard on the I need to see it train. So for you to be at 2 practices without Malachi Fields and you're saying this, I'm like, okay, all right.
And
hey, Insured's calling you out, Trev. He's coming at you. He's coming at you.
Look, I know. I'm sorry, man, but here's why I say that. Some of my reason for saying that is the other state of other teams in college football. There's some that are going to be shoo-ins. Let's just call Ohio State in there. Fair. I think we can all agree fair. But with that being said, when I say I need to see it, I wasn't in this chair last spring. When I got to see it, it was the clips on YouTube where everybody looks good on routes versus air. Where I got to see it was the 15-second. Yeah, look, man, anybody can look super, super awesome when they have a hype video tagged behind them and it's routes on air or them running without a helmet on. But being in person, getting to see it, knowing what other things have looked like in person, and now I get a glimpse of it before we get to the blue gold game is a factor. But then I start looking at the state of college football around. I don't know what the other teams are that are going to be up in that conversation. I can think of some. Ohio State's going to be in there. Clemson's going to be in there with all the young talent that they're bringing back. But outside of those 2 teams, off the top of my head, I can't think of another team where I go and I look at their receiving core and I say, oh, yeah, they're going into this year loaded. Oregon brings back Evan Stewart. We'll see how that plays out. They're also going through some quarterback changes. I know some other teams made moves in the portal. I am very far away from throwing Penn State in that loop, despite them making some changes in the portal.
Yeah, no. They're not in that conversation, dude. Even if you count tight ends, they're not in the top 10 conversation.
No.
They got shut out.
Yeah. LSU.
Bama's going to have a really good receiving core with Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton and those guys. Yeah.
Yep.
LSU's going to have a really good one.
Yep. Yeah. LSU. Now, my one
Auburn's got a sneaky good receiver class too, Trev, with some of their young guys coming up. What's your one pause? Sorry.
But my one pause with some of these other schools, one, with LSU, I don't know how much of it is just – I don't know how much more Garrett Nussmeier is going to elevate that room, if I'm just being 100% honest. I don't know if we've seen his peak or if he has another step that he can go to. With schools like Auburn, they have a sneaky good receiving core. I don't know what kind of numbers they're going to put up. I don't know how much faith I have in the people that they brought in there. Some of it's going to continue to unfold, but that for me at the end of the year, I think that's where it's going to be. And so now when I say finish in the top 10, I'm not saying they're going to be third. I think that they could be eighth. I think that they could be ninth, but because I don't see a world where Notre Dame's receiving core comes in and they are better than Ohio
if they
State's.
play at their best. There's still a big gap between number one and wherever Notre Dame is.
Yeah.
Just because at their best, there's still no Jeremiah Smith in the room. So, yes, Texas lost a lot, but they've got a lot coming back.
Yep.
USC is a team that took a big hit, but there's still some talent there. There's still some very good. Is Oklahoma's receiving core going to be healthy? Because we look at it last year and it stunk, but it stunk because they had like 7 of their top 9 guys were out. Now Nick Anderson transferred, a couple guys. I think Deion Burks comes back. They'll have some guys. So there's going to be some decent. Arizona State brings back Jordan Tyson. So there's some good receiving cores out there, Trevor. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm buying that they have a shot to be there, and because of what I think is going to happen at quarterback with either CJ or Kenny. And I do think that we're going to look at this receiving core at the end of the year and say it's one of the 10 best in college football. Now, I'm with you. 6 to 10 is where I see them finishing. But if you give Notre Dame a 6 to 10 receiving core with a top 5 O-line room, a top 5 running, maybe a top 2 running back room, and a top 10 tight end room, and let's see at quarterback, then sure, we're going to have some fun this year. I mean, so there are a lot of good receiving rooms coming back, but all of them have a lot of them have similar questions to Notre Dame, like LSU. Everybody talks about LSU's receiving core. Could be good, but it's the same thing like that you have with Notre Dame. Well, yeah, I got to see Malachi Fields do it in a Notre Dame uniform. I got to see Barian Brown do it in an LSU uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some questions there, but I think Alabama with Ryan Williams, and then now you've got Isaiah Horton coming in. They'll be in that conversation, but like, the one thing is there's a clear number one, and it's not just because of Jeremiah Smith. You're going to have Cardinal Tate, is a number one for most teams. Brandon Ennis is a number one or number two for a lot of teams.
Oh, yeah.
You've got the Rogers kid that's going to be there who's a really talented player. It's not just your number one because you have that one guy.
Totally.
They're number one because their whole room is nasty. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that you mentioned, too, that Notre Dame has going for them is their run game. I mean, that's a big – I mean, if teams have to come in and game plan, obviously it's going to start with number 4 in the backfield. That's a big thing for me. It will also depend on how the quarterbacks play. I'm confident that whoever the starting quarterback is, you're going to get a bump in passing efficiency from last season. I think we can all agree on that. But yeah, man, they have the potential to do it. It's going to be really, really fun to watch. Really fun to watch. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame would have won a championship with Cam Ward last year.
Sell. Easy sell.
Yeah. Yeah. Buy, sell, hold from Bayside Tiger 6. The integrated girdle pads today are the one piece of sports equipment you wish you had growing up.
Yes, I hated girdles growing up because I even grew up in an era where you had to tie them into your pants, which was the worst. Like you had to loop them into your pants. It was terrible. And then the thigh pads would be in your pants. They were the worst. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose I'll buy this, but I did have those. Like when I was playing, I had the girdle pads in them. So, but they were great. Yeah, they were definitely great. Buy, sell, hold. If Notre Dame's quarterback finishes in the top 5 at the position, they will win it all.
Oh man, I tend to think buy. Because, if they're top 5 in the country quarterback, then this team is going to be amazing. that assumes that the defense doesn't take a step back, because you can't buy that, because if he's top 5, then that means the offensive line's playing well enough for him to be top 5, which makes this team scary good. And I'm assuming that the defense doesn't take a step back, but I got to kind of buy it with an asterisk, because I need a lot more context in that. Is the defense devastated and ravaged by injuries? Does Chris Ash come in and we find out he was actually a plant by Ohio State and Urban Meyer to ruin Notre Dame's program? I'm being hyperbolic and funny here, sarcastic here, but like, there's so much we don't know. There's so many potential caveats, but barring some of those wild things happening that I don't think is going to happen, then yeah, I think that makes Notre Dame like really, really, really good. Yeah, really good. And again, top 5 doesn't mean 40 touchdowns. Top 5 is quality of play.
Yeah.
You don't look at production alone and say that equals top 5. Otherwise, we're going to put the top 5 quarterbacks in college football next year all air raid guys. Like that's not how it works. You look at last year and you say, okay, was Kyle McCord the number 1 quarterback in college football last year? I don't think he was, but he was number 1 in production by a lot. He also attempted 70 more passes than anyone else in college football. So it's not just about your production. It's about your level of play. And that's what I look at. I mean, you could throw 32. You could throw 30. I mean, in 2005, Brady Quinn was a top 5 quarterback in the country, and he threw, 32 touchdowns?
Mm-hmm.
I think in 2005, so it's not always about production. It's about level of play. Yep. Yeah, he threw 32 touchdowns in 05. Brady Quinn was absolutely a top 3 quarterback in 05. It was Leinart, Vince, and Brady. That's how not in any order. That was the 3. I'd say Vince, Leinart, and Brady, but you get the point that I'm making. So that's what I care about.
I will always evaluate quarterbacks heavier in the settings that they play. Big games. I mean, if I learned my lesson from 2023, it's like, look, man, calling a spade here, everybody can look awesome against Central Michigan if you're the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, Ohio State.
You mean like when Ian Book threw 34 touchdowns and 18 of them came in 5 games against teams that suck and Navy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I gauge my top 5. If I can sit back and look, it's like, okay, they performed well in big games. Because if that's the case, then in 2006, Colt Brennan was the best quarterback in college football. And it's, so that's how I look at it. And there is a little bit of an and in there, because if I go back to 2023, I don't know if I'm saying J.J. McCarthy is a top 5 quarterback in college football. I think it's up for debate, but I don't know if I would say it. So it is an and, right. But I weigh really, really heavy on what do you do in the big moments. And I look at a guy like Will Howard and say, in the big moments, he played well outside of the Michigan game, And so, but I don't even know if you'd call that a big it was, because it's a rivalry, but I mean, they were playing a 6-5 football team at the time. Once he got to the playoffs at the level that it mattered, he played really well. So, that's where I'm at with it.
Insured by Big is forever going to be allowed to post in our chat because you just called me a genius. So that's always a great way to get in my good favor. So thank you for that very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, top 5. So that's where I'm at. Top 5 for me, Trev. We're same page. That's level of play. Now, level of play will result in an impressive level of production, but it could be 33 touchdowns and it's still elite football. You're completing a bunch of passes to get you inside the 10, and then Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and those guys are scoring touchdowns. I mean, that's going to be a fact. When you have the explosiveness Notre Dame has at running back, there's going to be times when you're like, well, why'd you only throw 1 touchdown pass? Well, because Jeremiah had a 65-yard touchdown run, and Jadarian had a 50-yard touchdown run, and so-and-so took a kickback 100 yards. So I didn't get a lot of chances to throw a lot of touchdowns. So That's kind of where I look at it. But if he's top 5, I just, barring something dramatic happening, I have a hard time with this team not winning and seeing them not winning at all. Yeah. I'll say this too, especially since, like, you could make a case that an overall performance that Riley Leonard from Louisville on was a top 5 quarterback in just overall level of impact on your football team. But the reality is the quarterback that can have an impact more as a thrower can, in my opinion, have an even greater impact on a football team.
Yeah.
Than a guy who's more of a runner first.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I'm not going to argue with somebody if they want to say Riley wasn't top 5. I think he was from Louisville on. Keep what I'm saying, from Louisville on, because he was definitely not when you include the first 4 games. Like, that, definitely not. But from Louisville on, I think he was a top 5 quarterback because of just the impact he had on the game. So, and I would just like to encourage people who come into the chat talking about what other people say on shows. We put enough content out every day. Y'all don't need to waste your time on some of those. Some of those are good, but like there's one in particular that has some really apparently has some really wild quarterback takes. People who keep asking me about it. Unsubscribe, save your money, don't waste your time, and then you'll get real takes. So I just want to throw that out there.
Fair enough.
I'm referring to one in particular.
Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame finishes the 2025-2026 season with a top 3 player at all of the following positions: running back, offensive line, linebacker, cornerback, and safety.
With a top 3 player at all of so running back, yes. Cornerback, yes. O-line, maybe. Linebacker, maybe. Safety, maybe. I'm going to sell that because that's just for all of them, it'd be tough. I could see 3 to 4 of them, but if you'd have said top 10, I might have been there with you, but not the others. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with that. I'm buying running back. I'm buying corner. The other ones, I'm kind of a hold. And it also depends on what we're talking about top 3. Or I would like just stats or impact, because impact, if we're just strictly talking about that, then I would say that linebacker would be a buy. Safety, I would say, would be a buy. But if we're talking like just strictly numbers, we've talked before about how Notre Dame is going to rotate their linebackers so much really outside of Drake Bowen that I don't know if any of them are going to put up the numbers to get the recognition to be a top 3 guy. So.
But as I said during my vacation interruption, I do think Drake would be the one with the chance to do it because I do think he'll play more this year than maybe he did last year because he's the Mike.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. Buy, sell, hold. You have to buy one, sell one, hold one. The prime version of these coaches having the same level of success in today's era. Jimmy Johnson at Miami, Steve Spurrier at Florida, Pete Carroll at USC.
I don't want to play this game anymore. I don't want to have to sell one of these guys. These are legends, bro. Like, I'm not going to sell any of those guys. Are you kidding me? Those are all 3 Hall of Famers. I'm not selling any of those guys. I will say this because Bayside, I love this question. And what makes it a great submission is the fact that I don't want to answer it. You know what I mean? But I'll say this. The guy that I think would most likely fit into today's era from a program building standpoint is Pete Carroll.
Yep.
I think Pete Carroll would do a great job with NIL and all that kind of stuff. I think Jimmy Johnson would probably have the toughest time with the modern era athlete. I think the guy that would fit best from a schematic standpoint, a guy that would be putting up monster offenses in this era, is Steve Spurrier. I think he would also be someone who would probably thrive to a degree in the NIL era. But I think Pete lived in an NIL era. That's what was going on at USC. I mean, that's the reality. So I think Pete would thrive in the modern era.
Yeah.
Like today, I mean, if Pete Carroll came back to coaching college football right now, not even prime 2000s Pete Carroll, right now, I think he would thrive in the college game as far as roster building. Jimmy Johnson's just so much more old school than those guys. I don't know, but I also am like, look, guys like Jimmy Johnson adapt. That's what legends do. That's what great coaches do. They adapt. So yeah, I think they'd all do great. I don't want to play this game. Did you ever see that Key and Peele skit? Front hand, backhand. I don't want to slap it no more. You know, like I don't want to play this game anymore. I don't want to play this game anymore, man. So yeah. Have you seen that, Trev?
Oh, I get it now. Backhand.
Backhand. Just when I start to get good at this game, you want to quit. That was a stupid skit.
Oh man. Goodness. Buy, sell, hold from Lucky Duck 512. An Arch Manning-led Texas versus a CJ Carr-led Notre Dame would be the dream championship game matchup for the committee and TV people.
I think so. I do. I mean, look, Ohio State's always great for TV ratings. Like they just are. They have a huge fan base from a volume standpoint. But I think when you look at Manning versus Carr, you know, those are legendary names at two legendary programs. Texas has a massive fan base also. I think that would be the dream sales. They would sell the heck out of that. Notre Dame versus Texas, rematch of 1973's Cotton Bowl, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And that'd be a if you're a promoter, that is like a dream matchup. An Arch Manning-led Texas team against a CJ Carr-led Notre Dame team. Yeah, that would be. And again, I'm not even speaking to would CJ be better than or would Kenny be better than It's just looking at it from the standpoint of just narratives. There's no question that Notre Dame will get more hype if CJ Carr's playing well than if Kenny Minchie's playing well, simply because you'll not only get the team hype, but the individual hype will be even greater with CJ than it would be with Kenny or Steve. Fair or not, that's just a fact. Because of the name recognition and who his grandpa is and all that kind of stuff. Like, I got to think, though, that the dream matchup actually would be a Bryce Underwood-led Michigan team someday against a CJ Carr-led Notre Dame team. Because if you could sell the CJ, his dad played quarterback in Michigan. His grandpa won a Heisman Trophy, won a national championship in Michigan. Like that would be the ultimate, I'll say this. Here would be the dream scenario for the College Football Playoff Committee and the TV people. And you've got in the Final Four, you've got Arch and Texas against Julian Saint and Ohio State. And the other Final Four, or Alabama, pick one of those two big time. The other Final Four is Underwood and Michigan against CJ and Notre Dame, because you'd have two angles. Number one is Bryce beat CJ in the state championship game when CJ was a senior, or in the playoffs when CJ was a senior. And then on the other end, you've got the CJ Carr, grandpa, dad, Michigan connection, and then Texas and Notre Dame in the championship game. Like the ratings for that Final Four would be insane.
Oh, yeah.
So Texas in either Alabama or Ohio State, those would be insane ratings. Insane ratings. I'd probably lean with Alabama over Ohio State simply because if it was Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Texas, we'd have the same problem we did this year where the South checked out in the semifinals. SEC fans kind of checked out in the semifinals. That hurt ratings.
Yep. Another aspect of the scenario too is you'd have two coaches, like two. I don't want to say up and coming because Sark has been a coach for a while, but you got two coaches.
Sark's not as young as he looks.
Yeah. But you have two coaches that are looking for that, like to get over the hump. You know, is it going to be the veteran Steve Sarkisian that's been around for a while, or is it going to be the young and up and coming Marcus Freeman? Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a lot of fun. Buy, sell, hold. Being happy with a Mike Brown's recruiting with a 3-man class at receiver of Dylan Faison, Caden Finley, and Braden Robinson.
Buy. I mean, Caden Finley's a top 100 player for me.
Yeah.
Dylan Faison's a top 250 player for me. Braden Robinson is a tougher kid to grade because of his size, but he's super explosive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd be happy with that. That's a buy. That's a buy.
Yep. That is.
Is it like elite program's going to go out there and score 70 points a game next year? No. But is that needle moving? Yeah, absolutely. Caden Finley's a dude. Dylan Faison's better in high school than his brother was, and Braden Robinson's would be one of the most explosive receivers Notre Dame has signed in a while. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I will buy that one.
Buy, sell, hold again from Lucky Duck. Sark and Dan Lanning are both on the verge of becoming the new James Franklin and Brian Kelly in not being able to win the big games that matter if they have similar seasons as this past year.
I buy that if they have similar seasons, that will be the narrative. I don't necessarily buy that they're both destined to have those type of seasons. That's where I would push back on. But if you're granting the premise that if they have similar seasons this year to last year, that they will be that, yeah, I'll say that. Now, here's the thing. I will say I will buy that even stronger with Dan Lanning. If they're one and done in the playoffs again, he's going to start getting some flack. The one difference I would say is Sark did win 2 playoff games, including a win over Dabo. And it would be Sark's 3rd straight playoff Final Four appearance if they repeat last year. That's impressive. 3 straight Final Fours. Now, you could say, hey, they should have won one by now. But, like, if Dan Lanning has a similar season to last year, he's still 0 for even getting in the Final Four. You know, I mean, he still hasn't won that kind of game. So I would buy it even stronger for Dan Lanning. But if they both, you know, kind of have some of those, like, how did you lose to that team type moments, then sure, I could see that. I could certainly see that. Yeah.
I could see it being, gosh, this one's tough for me. I think I'm leaning towards sell. For me, with Sark, to Brian's point about making the Final Four if they had a similar season, I mean, they had an opportunity to beat Ohio State. They just didn't capitalize. And after a couple of bad play calls, yeah, it's not great. Look, man, I'm in agreement that Dan Lanning can't be a one and done in the playoffs again, especially if he gets another bye. But Dan Lanning in his first year in the Big Ten did what James Franklin hasn't been able to do in a decade in the Big Ten. Beat Ohio State in the regular season and win the conference. You know, like that is the one thing that is still edging out Dan Lanning over James Franklin for me. You know, now I will say there is something to be said about how Dan Lanning can't get to that big stage like the playoffs and, you know, have what he did. But I will also say Dan Lanning lost to the team in the playoffs that he already faced in the regular season and that eventually went on to win the national championship.
Yeah, you know what bothers me about that one though, Trev, is they got destroyed.
Fair.
That's the problem. You know, where Sark's 2 teams that lost in the Final Four, neither of them got destroyed. Now, They were down early to Texas, but they had a shot at the end of the game to take a lead. They had the ball with a chance to take a lead late in that game against Washington. And then against Ohio State, they're at the 1-yard line getting ready to tie it up in the 4th quarter. Whereas Oregon went out there, and by the end of the 1st quarter, you're like, this one's over.
Yep.
And so it's like the 1-point regular season win that happened 3 months ago doesn't really carry as much when you get there and then just pee the bed. Let's just be honest.
Fair.
They got there and choked. And they've had some games like that. I mean, his first game against Georgia, they got beat 49-3. He has not done well out of league in his tenure when he's had to play teams out of his conference. Now, the Big Ten season this year helped. But, you know, like to your point, I mean, now if this year they end up doing that again, he'll have a road win over Penn State, which you've talked about, which should be pretty big. But then again, you get to the semifinal or the quarterfinals, you get smacked again.
Yeah.
Like, so that's the thing is at least Sark's teams are competitive. I think in some ways Sark has underachieved a little bit, but his teams have been competitive. You can't say that about Lanning's teams in some of those games. And I think that's something that to me holds me back a little bit with him is that they not only got beat by Ohio State this year, they got punished. Like game over by halftime. You can't say that about Sark's teams. And you could say, well, Notre Dame was down big against Ohio State. Valid. But what did Notre Dame do in the second half? They made it a game. Oregon just kind of rolled over and died.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah.
Difference.
Agreed. No, I'm with that. I'm with that completely. If we were comparing Sark and Lanning, I would absolutely be on board. I just don't know if I'm ready to compare Dan Lanning to Brian Kelly or James Franklin yet. That's where I'm at.
Fair. Yeah, I would say Sark is Lanning is more like Brian Kelly than Sark.
Yeah. Yes.
Because Sark still has a win at Bama. You know, I mean, he's done some of those things. He's a blowout win at Bama. Mm-hmm. You know, they there's some things they've done that are impressive. That the two Georgia losses stung, but that's just unique to Georgia. They beat Clemson. They beat Alabama on the road in 2023 and all these other type of things. So, but Lanning is kind of in that territory. I think Sark is kind of similar to Franklin in that Franklin doesn't get blown out. He used to get blown out a lot. Like every other year, Michigan and Penn State would trade blowout wins over each other. Remember that?
Yeah.
And, the year they won the Big Ten, they lost at home to Michigan or lost on the road to Michigan, something like 49-10 or something like that. It was just insane. And also lost to Pitt.
Yep.
Like they haven't had that the last couple of years. Their losses are more competitive. And, but it's like, but there's not the big wins that Sark has. And that's kind of how it is with Franklin. Like you lose to every team that you play that's on your level, you lose to. Yeah. I mean, that'd be my question. Like, what's the big win that Penn State's had under James Franklin where they beat a team where you're like, boy, that team was every bit as talented as they were? You'd have to me, go back to Ohio State in 2016. Yeah. And that might have been Urban Meyer's worst team.
Yeah.
And he got beat by Clemson in the playoffs 31-0.
Yeah.
But that would be kind of it's an interesting conversation. Very interesting conversation.
I'm with you. I think Sark would be the complement to Franklin. Lanning would be the complement to Brian Kelly, because when they do get to that stage, like we saw at Notre Dame, when Brian Kelly got to that stage of the playoffs, it was a boat race.
Yes.
Not in the favor of Notre Dame. Yep.
Yeah, they were just not competitive.
Yep, I would agree. Oh, yeah. Biso hold Oklahoma not being a top 1 to 2 team in their conference will lead to worse and worse recruiting and ultimately lead the Sooners to being a mid-tier program along the lines of Nebraska.
I'm going to sell that. I mean, look, if Oklahoma finishes in the top 5 of the SEC the next 5 years, they're a borderline playoff team every year.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to tell me outside the top 5. You have to lower that number a little bit, because if they're third in the Big 12, the SEC, if they're fourth in the SEC every year, more often than not, they're in the playoffs, or they're going into the last game of the regular season with a shot. If somebody loses, if this team gets upset, then we have a shot to jump in, and that would then help recruiting and lead to them being an even better team. Yeah. They'd have to finish outside the top 4 or 5 every year for me to buy that. And honestly, Texas is a team. Oklahoma's a different animal than Nebraska also, in that it's easier to recruit to Oklahoma than it is Nebraska. There's really good talent in the state of Oklahoma, much better than what we see in the state of Nebraska. You get athletes in the state of Oklahoma. I mean, I talk about Braden Robinson being a dynamic player. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to watch Mason James yet. He's going to be on campus this week for a visit. That dude is really explosive. He's from Norman, Oklahoma. He's literally from where you don't see guys like that very often come out of Nebraska. Even Xavier Watts, who's an elite player coming out of Nebraska, he wasn't that type of explosive athlete. But Xavier Watts is also a bit of a unicorn coming out of that area. So just the state of Oklahoma is a lot better. But the other part of it is you're a hop and a skip away from Dallas. In when you're in Norman, Oklahoma. I think it's I'm going to look it up. I think it's like 2 hours. Let me look this up real quick. I think it's like a 2-hour drive. It's a 3-hour drive from Norman to Dallas. So it's a much different. It's 9.5 hours to get there from Lincoln, Nebraska. And when you look at the state of Oklahoma, also you border Missouri, which has talent. You're bordering Texas, which has a ton of talent. You're a hop and a skip from Louisiana that has a lot of talent. Like Oklahoma's like, if you look at a map, there's Louisiana, and then there's like this little patch of like Texas, and what is it? Is it Arkansas? Let me look at the map. I think it's Arkansas. Yeah, Arkansas. Yeah. There's this little patch where there's Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, and then it's Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of talent where Nebraska is just not. It's just they're just not. They're small little part of their state borders Missouri, and then they border Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Iowa. It's a different recruiting world than it is for Oklahoma. It's just a different animal. So I think Oklahoma is always a good coaching hire away. Like, remember, there was a time in the 90s before they hired Bob Stoops where after Barry Switzer left, Oklahoma went through some challenging seasons where they weren't very good. And I'm going to pull up, give me a second here. So you had Barry Switzer left in 1988. And then he was replaced by Gary Gibbs. Gary Gibbs in his 6 years went 7-4, 8-3, 9-3, 5-4-2, 9-3, 6-6. For the record, I'm not pulling these out of my head. I'm literally reading off of the thing. So some people think some of the stuff I pull out of my head. I don't. He was replaced by Howard Schnellenberger, who went at Oklahoma 5-1 in his only season there. He got fired. Then he was replaced by John Blake, which is relevant to Notre Dame fans because John Blake's son Jordan just got hired from Notre Dame. But John Blake went 3-8, 4-8, and 5-6. So pretty rough stretch there for Oklahoma, where they were a very mediocre to bad football team. Well, after they got rid of John Blake, they went out and hired the defensive coordinator at the University of Florida, guy that was working with Steve Spurrier, guy by the name of Bob Stoops. And Bob Stoops went 7-5 in his first year at Oklahoma, and then won a national title in year 2, and then won 11, 12, 12, 11, 12, 12, 12, 8, 11, 11, 12, 8, 12, 10, 10, 11, 8, 11, and 11 wins in his career. One hire, they were boom right back on track. Why? Because Oklahoma can recruit from all around that talent-rich region, and Oklahoma's always been able to go down to California and always been able to go down to Florida and get kids, like for as long as I can remember. And so now there was a time when Nebraska could go down to Florida and get some kids, but that's just man, it's just a different animal. Like you've heard me talk about you've heard me talk on this show, Trey, about Jamel Holloway, how much I loved watching Jamel Holloway when I was a kid. Won a title in Oklahoma. He's from California. This is back in the 80s. So they've always been able to recruit all over. Nebraska, to me, needs a unique hire to win, and I don't know that they can win quite like they did back in the day, where they're a top 3 to 5 team every year. I don't know that they can win like that. I don't know that they can win like Tom Osborne. I think they can be more like Frank Solich, a lot of 9-10 win seasons, and then occasionally you get that really senior-laden team, you get the right transfers in, and you can maybe make a run to the title, maybe. Whereas I think if Oklahoma hires the right coach, they're a top 8 team every year. And over the course of a decade, they win at least one title. That's what I think Oklahoma is. So I don't know that Nebraska can be that. Those are my thoughts on that. But yeah, I just think Oklahoma's just got a better foundation to win than Nebraska does.
From an optics standpoint, and I agree with what you said, but I will say this, from an optics standpoint, I can see if Oklahoma doesn't get that guy. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that Brent Venables isn't. It's just right now things are not looking great. I mean,
I'll say it. I don't think he is.
Yeah, Oklahoma has made the postseason every single year since 1998. They have not had a season where they have not been bowl eligible since 1998. The first coach that goes not bowl eligible, like under 6 wins, as I would have to imagine, fired on the spot.
Yeah.
Gone. Now, I will say this from an optics perspective. I see where you're coming from here, Lucky Duck, because Nebraska is like when people start talking about blue bloods, Nebraska is always mentioned because of the runs that they had. But Nebraska hasn't been relevant in college football like that, like a championship contender in like 20 years.
Right.
If
Since that
if
01, 02
Yep.
period where and then they fired Solich, and then like Bo
Mhm.
Pelini won 9 games every year, had a couple 10-win seasons, but they were unimpressive. I mean, that's why he got fired. They were winning in the Big Ten West, and then whatever the leaders legend thing that they were in, and just yeah.
Yep. But if Oklahoma doesn't make that hire and they stick with a guy like Venables who's able to get them to 6-7 wins every year, I think that could be the optics. But to Brian's point, the second they do make that right hire, I think that changes immediately and they're back
Right.
to being a perennial playoff team, whereas Nebraska doesn't
Right.
have that. However, optics wise, if they don't make that change, then I do think that they could start to be looked at as that, which is crazy to
Yeah.
say when we're
Yeah.
talking about Oklahoma.
I do think it's harder now for them since they
Mm.
left the Big 12. I still think that was a stupid decision. I think it's
Yeah.
harder for them now to do that in the SEC. Here's what I'll say. They will need to finish in the top 4 to 5 every in the SEC. That's
Yep.
harder now than because like when he was at Oklahoma, they were oftentimes the most talented team in the league. And a lot of
Mhm.
times by a mile. When Texas was struggling, by a mile.
Mhm.
That's not gonna often be the case now.
Mhm.
Even if they hire the right coach. That's why I say you can do it. It'll be harder though. It'll be harder, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
can definitely do it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can definitely do
Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame's 2027 quarterback recruiting strategy.
it. I'm going to hold on that for now. I don't like it, but let me see how the response is when he gets out on the road and starts seeing kids.
Yeah.
For now, I don't like it, but I'm going to hold and see the effectiveness of it. But I'm if I had to pick one now, I would sell it, but I want to just give it a little bit more time to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold from Iden Benami. Jadarian Price will wear a Notre Dame leprechaun charm by Johnny Dang during the season.
Go ahead, Trev. You can handle that one. I have no clue what that. No
May
opinion on that whatsoever.
I mean, maybe. I mean, odds are he's going to be repping Johnny Dang because he signed an NIL deal with him. But a Notre Dame leprechaun charm, I guess I'll buy it because it's specific to Notre Dame. But I have no knowledge if Johnny Dang releases a Jadarian Price Notre Dame line. No idea, man. Couldn't tell you, Iden. Buy, sell, hold. Carson Beck's injury is going to negatively impact Miami more so than Riley's this past year.
This is a really good one. I don't think Riley Leonard had a negative impact on Notre Dame last year, though. Now, if you were to say early in the season, I would say yes. And here's why I say that, because obviously Riley's injury had a negative impact early. The reason I think it's worse for Carson Beck is because Carson's game requires Riley was not the thrower in 2024 that he was in 2022 at Duke. He wasn't. He was a better throwing quarterback in 2022.
Yep.
But because he's such a dynamic athlete and runner, he could still be an impact quarterback that leads you to a title game because he could do all that stuff with his legs. So even though he never got in the groove as a thrower for a host of reasons, he could still be an impact quarterback.
Yeah.
Carson Beck can't, because if you take away his ability to throw, he is nothing. He shouldn't start. And so all the things that you lose with him missing time, throwing to receivers and, questionable leadership and things like that, those are all things you got to be concerned about with him. That's going to have a much greater impact because he can't do other things to overcome. Like Riley Leonard could go make plays with his legs. He's struggling to throw the ball against Miami of Ohio. So he's just like, fine, I'm just going to handle this thing running wise, and just rips off a 50-yard touchdown, has a 40-yard run in that game, runs for 134 yards. Struggle a little bit early throwing the ball against Purdue, so he just runs for 100 yards in the first half. You know what I mean? Like, Carson Beck ain't doing that. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm buying this too. Riley Leonard had a fantastic defense this past season. Miami's defense in 2025 will not sniff what Notre Dame's defense was in 2024. And that's not necessarily a knock on Miami. I think they have a new defensive coordinator right now, but it's just
They could finish in the top 25 defensively, and they're not going to sniff what Notre Dame was last year. Notre Dame had a top 5 defense last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for all those reasons, I think Carson Beck is going to have to put the team more on his shoulders than what Riley had to. Like, Riley had to put the team on his shoulders in moments. Carson Beck might have to do that for stretches of games. And
Riley
so
Leonard is also a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
Carson Beck is not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see the Notre Dame quarterbacks talking about Riley Leonard all the time. Like
yeah.
Kenny Minchie made a comment about how I don't want to say something because I know Riley's going to read this. And it was like this fun little exchange. The Georgia players aren't talking about Carson Beck like that. just leave it at that and we can move on. But yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold. Over 4 sacks and over 1 pick against Miami.
I'm going to hold the first one and buy the second one.
Yeah, I'm with that. Buy, sell, hold. Jadon Blair will be starting next to Adon by the USC game.
I'm going to sell that. I think you're going to see one of the veterans start next to him. And I think Adon is going to be I think they're going to do with Jadon, a lot like what we saw Notre Dame do with Kyle Hamilton in 2019.
Yeah.
Now, there's a little bit of a difference because in 2019, you had 2 returning starters in Jalen Elliott and Alohi Gilman. This year, you only have 1 returning starter, but you do have a lot of veterans. You've got Jalen Stroman coming in. You've got Luke Tallett. You've got Bronte Johnson. I just think with Jadon, I don't know that you need to thrust him into the starting lineup right away. He's still going to play if he's in the top 4. And I think that'll be more of what you'll see from him as opposed to starting by, what would that be, game 6 or 7? October 18th?
7.
Yeah. If anything, I would say after USC, he would then maybe creep in the lineup there. But I want to pump the brakes a little bit on Jadon starting right away, just because I want to get through the whole spring and just see how he develops and grows. But the tools are there for him to win that kind of job. My comment is more about I just like the room.
Yeah.
I think the room is it's a good room.
Mm-hmm.
But I fully expect Jadon to play. I fully expect him to be a part of what they're doing this year. I'll be surprised if he isn't.
Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will pick up a top 5 cornerback in the portal.
So.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with that. Buy, sell, hold from Detroit Hunter. Louisville will be worse off at quarterback this year, but better as a team.
This is a good one. So I buy the part about quarterback. You know I'm not a big Miller Moss fan. Now, Miller Moss could end up still putting up good numbers in Jeff Brom's offense. I mean, Aiden O'Connell and David Bluff became NFL quarterbacks playing for Jeff Brom. So I think the numbers will be there, but will the impact play be there? That's really more my question is. They got talent at receiver. We talked about that. Their offensive line is going to look a little bit different. Should still be pretty good. Their running back room is really good. The reason that I have doubts about this question and why ultimately I think I'm going to sell it is because they lost a ton off their defense, and I'm not a big Ron English fan as a coordinator.
Yeah.
So you can't lose that much talent from your defense, especially your defensive line. I mean, they lost Ashton Gillott, Thor Griffith, Desmond Tell, Raymond Puryear. They also lost, obviously, Jared Dawson, who's at Notre Dame. I mean, they lost a big chunk of their D-line. And I do like their linebacker room, but they lost 3 of their 4 starters in the secondary. It's a brand new looking defense, and I don't know, Trev, that I trust Ron English to be the guy that's going to get all those guys moving on the same page. Now, their record might be better, but that doesn't make them a better team because they play Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, Georgia Tech. Then they play at Notre Dame. No, that's their 24 schedule. Excuse me. Let me go to 2025. Probably helps if I'm reading the right schedule. You know
I
what
was
I
about
mean?
to say that schedule sounds really familiar.
Yeah, like, man, they just gave them the same schedule. What? That's lazy, ACC. What are you guys doing? All right, so they play Eastern Kentucky, James Madison at home, Bowling Green at home, at Pitt, home against Virginia, at Miami, home against BC, at Virginia Tech, home against Cal, home against Clemson, at SMU, home against Kentucky. So that's a good schedule. It's a challenging schedule, but I don't know that it's quite as impactful as what last year's was.
Sure.
So I'm going to sell that one. And I also think there's a few ACC teams that I think are ascending a little bit that could make this a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
But if I had greater confidence in the defense, Trev, I'd be okay buying this because I think their offense has a chance to be pretty good this season.
Yep. I am keeping my eye on Isaac Brown, their running back that they have coming back. I like him a lot, but I'm with you on Miller Moss.
But he's not it. That's what I like about that room, Trev, is Louisville's backfield is not, if he's good, well, if he gets hurt, they're screwed. They got a really deep backfield.
Yep.
Really deep backfield. Sorry for cutting you off, but yeah, I like that kid
you're
too.
good.
But I like that room. I like that room as a whole, but he's a dynamic player, man.
Really good running back.
Dynamic player.
They also lost a good amount of their receivers too. Like I know, is Ja'Cory Brooks gone?
Yeah, he's the only one of that group that's gone. They bring back Colin Lacey, who was banged up last year, who I think is a really good football player. They bring back Chris Bell, comes back this season. And then they got a transfer, Bobby Golden, transferred in from a Mac school. He's a solid slot kind of guy. But, they'll have talent there. And then their tight end, they got some talent in the tight end room. But, yeah, the two outside guys will be really good.
Yep.
They'll be really good.
Okay. Buy, sell, hold. Ohio State threw the Michigan monkey off their back when they won the national championship, and it won't be a problem this year.
Well, I'm going to sell this because I think Ohio State beats Michigan. But I don't think it has anything to do with the throwing the monkey off their back. They won't throw the Michigan monkey off their back till they beat Michigan. So I'm selling that. Because I'll say this. If Ohio State goes out this year and they're 10-1 in the regular season and they lose to Michigan and you go 10-2 and that knocks them out of the playoffs, you will see a large contingent of Ohio State fans on social media talking about how last year was a fluke. They shouldn't even been in. They lost 2 games. Ryan Day can't beat Michigan, blah, 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 blah. They need to go hire Mike Vrabel or Marcus Freeman or some other dumb thing that Ohio State fans like to say. So I'm selling that because Ryan Day will go right back under the bus if they lose to Michigan again this year and don't win a title. So like you have to have grown up in one of those 2 states to really understand the neurotic nature of that rivalry. It's nuts. Like those people are nuts when it comes to that rivalry. So I'm going to sell that. They'll get that Michigan monkey off their back when they beat Michigan.
I'm going to sell it until proven otherwise. You go back through and you look at the history of the last 4 years, there's nothing that should have said that Ohio State loses those games. I've said this a couple times. Like, look, yes, I understand the arguments that can be made for it this year. They just won the Natty. Jeremiah Smith comes back, and Caleb Downs is coming back. Yeah, well, Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs were on that team last year. And all of the, 15 players that are about to get drafted were on it. You know, what can you say? I mean, the fact that C.J. Stroud never beat Michigan is crazy to me.
I still can't fathom that. I still have a hard time. I mean, I know it. I've said it. But just to kind of, you're like, no.
Yeah,
no,
right?
Really? No.
So until proven otherwise, to Brian's point, the thing that gets the monkey off the back is that he does it. And reality is as good as Ryan Day has been in total win-losses, he just won the national championship. It's like 1-5 against Michigan. 1-4, 1-5, something like that. And so it's just like, I gotta.
And this last year's loss was so bad.
Crazy.
Because Michigan was so average. So average.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm going the wrong way.
No worries.
I got that one. Okay, here we go.
Buy, sell, hold. Iowa as a dark horse, Big Ten title contender this year.
Okay, I'm going to sell that. And here's why I'm going to sell that, because of the new makeup of the league. Because you can't like in the past, you could just win a week Big Ten West, and then you just had to like have like that one good game against whoever you're playing in the East. And it's not that way anymore because now it's just best record. And so I can't go with them there. And then I also think their schedule is you look at their conference schedule. They play Indiana at home. They play at Rutgers, at Wisconsin. They play at USC, at Nebraska. They also play home against Penn State, home against Indiana, home against Oregon, home against Michigan State, home against Minnesota. And then non-conference, they play at Iowa State, but that won't impact whether they can, whether they're playing. I mean, they could they could lose to Iowa State by 50 and still win the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just doesn't impact there. But I really like this Iowa team, and I think they are a contender to be one of the top teams in the Big Ten. But to win it, I have a hard time with that roster, which is good. I love the portal quarterback they got. They got the kid from Mark Gronowski from San Diego State. It's a really good kind of dual threat type quarterback. I think that was a great pickup. They've got some talent coming. Their defense is, as long as Phil Parker's there, is always going to be really, really good. But that's a tough schedule. And there's just like when your roster isn't like Ohio State's, isn't like Notre Dame's, isn't like some of those top teams, you have to bring it more often than not, or you're going to get beat because you're still going to have half your schedule has a better roster than yours. So But I like the heart of your submission, Detroit Hunter, is I'm with, because I think Iowa's going to be sneaky. Like, they're going to upset one of those teams this year, in my opinion. Like, you look at their schedule, Trev. They play Indiana, Penn State, Oregon, USC, at Nebraska. They're going to win at least one of those games, if not two. Like, they're going to have a couple upsets this year. But then I could see them beating Penn State and Oregon at home, Trev. I could see that. And Indiana at home and still lose at Iowa State, still lose at Wisconsin, still lose at USC, still lose at Nebraska.
Yeah.
Like, that's a tough schedule for that roster. That's not as tough of a schedule if you got Ohio State's roster, but they don't have Ohio State's roster. They got their roster.
From a result standpoint, Iowa to me is the Ole Miss of the Big Ten. Nobody ever really wants to play them because it could have like the result of the Georgia Ole Miss game this past year. Talent levels were different on the rosters. That I agree with. But, for me, I look at it, it's like teams will always talk about Ole Miss. People will always talk about Ole Miss. Hey, could Ole Miss do it this year? Is this year they win the SEC? No, it's not. It's going to be Bama, Texas, or Georgia. Hey, Iowa could do it this year? No, it'll be Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, or now Oregon. It's just they're always in the conversation. Like they're always kind of like in the dining room, never at the table. That's kind of how I view Iowa. They're always going to be an 8 to 10 win team. You're never going to want to go play them at their place, but they just don't have enough, whatever it is. Ole Miss, it's not really a talent thing. I think it's kind of a coaching thing. Iowa, I don't think that it's a coaching thing. I think it's just their identity of football is they're just going to score 19 points a game until further notice. Ole Miss, they're always going to put up 50 points a game or 30 points a game, but allow X amount. Right. Like that's just that's who they are. That's how I view them.
I think their offense is going to be better this year. I do.
I hope so.
But better for Iowa is not good enough to necessarily win 10-plus games against that schedule.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, you basically, with the new lineup, you basically replaced Purdue with Oregon and Northwestern with USC. It's a different animal than what they used to have.
Yeah.
But I do like this team. Like this Iowa team a couple years ago in the Big Ten West would have been really scary good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Buy, sell, hold. 3 teams from the state of Texas make the college football playoffs.
I'm going to sell because I don't think SMU makes it back. I do think Texas makes it back again. I don't think SMU makes it back. I don't think the group of 5 team will be one of the Texas teams. So then it comes down to Does Texas and Texas A&M both make it out of the SEC, or is there 2 Big 12 teams from Texas that make it, plus Texas or Texas A&M? That's going to be tough. Without SMU, that's going to be tough. And I don't think SMU gets back. I think SMU is going to be a really good team again this year. I don't think what they did last year was a fluke. I think I picked them 5th in the league. Like, I thought they were going to be one of the better teams in the league, Trev. I did not see them winning it, but I thought they were going to be I think I predicted them to go 9-3 last year. That's still a team with talent. That's still a good football team. I just don't think that they're going to – I think the ACC is going to be a little bit better, and I don't know that they're going to get the benefit of the doubt from the committee late in the season the way they did last year. But they got to play at Baylor at home. They got to play at TCU, at Clemson, at BC, at Cal, home against Louisville, home against Miami. That's going to be a little bit tougher. I mean, I see 2 losses at least on their schedule this year. Between at TCU, at Clemson, home against Miami, at BC, home against Louisville, at Cal. Of those 6 games, I think they lose 2 of them. I didn't include Baylor at home, Syracuse at home, and I just don't think that gets them back in. It could get them in the SEC title game again because, one of those teams was a non-conference game, but I think that ultimately they won't get back in. So then does A&M get in this year with Texas? I don't think so. I think especially since A&M's got to play Notre Dame, you add that non-conference loss to your resume, makes it a little bit tougher when you're not Bama or a team like that. I think TCU's got a chance to make they're my dark horse Big 12 team this year. TCU is, but does TCU and Baylor make it? No. I mean, the best hope you have is that you get Texas. The winner of the Big 12 is a Texas team, TCU, Baylor, one of those teams, and then SMU gets back. I mean, that's your best bet. Because I would. You go ahead, Trev.
I was going to say I would go as far to say that I think Texas is closer to just having 1 team in the playoffs than 3. I think a lot has to happen for it to be 3.
Fair. Man, because now SMU is now in the group of or Power 5, you lose that potential of them being the G5 representative. I don't see UTSA. I don't see North Texas. I don't see Sam Houston being the group of 5 representative. You look at the Big 12, they got Baylor, TCU, Texas Tech, Houston as, all being options. I could see one of those teams winning the Big 12 and getting in. And certainly could see that. I think that's between TCU and Texas Tech and Baylor. I could certainly, and don't sleep on Willie Fritz in year 2. I could see one of them. But to your point, Trev, could I see Texas A&M also getting in? No, not yet. I think A&M is going to be closer this year than they were last year. But I think the schedule still is going to be a little bit too challenging for them. I see them losing to Notre Dame this season. They got to play at Texas. Pretty sure. Let me pull up their schedule. I'm pretty sure they play at Texas this season.
Yeah, they were at home this past year.
Yeah, they play at Texas at the end of the year. They've got to play at Notre Dame, at LSU, at Missouri, at Arkansas. They get home against Auburn, home against Mississippi State, home against Florida, home against South Carolina. That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
I mean, if Mike Elko goes 9-3 with the team he has against that schedule, that's a good football season. Because if he loses at Notre Dame, loses at LSU, and loses at Texas, so let's say he loses those 3 games. To go 9-3, that means he beat Auburn, beat Florida, beat Arkansas on the road, who's a rival, beat Missouri on the road, and beat South Carolina on the road or at home.
Amen.
That's a lot of good wins for
is.
A&M. But you'd still be 9-3, and you're not a playoff team, most likely. 9-3, they could sneak in late if they lose 3 before Texas and then upset Texas. That could get them in. But the problem is if you're on the bubble and your last game is at Texas or against Texas, that's going to consistently be that potential knock you out moment. The flip side is that could also be the potential leap you in moment if you're able to win that game.
Well, and depending on how the rest of the conference does, that could be the game that puts you into the SEC championship with an opportunity to maybe even get a bye. I mean,
Like
that's what's
last year.
crazy. Yeah.
If they
Yeah.
beat Texas last year, they're in the SEC title game.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. Buy, sell, hold again from D. Troll Hunter. If LSU, Ole Miss, or USC miss the playoffs this year, at least one of the programs will make a coaching change.
So it's possible. But if Brian Kelly goes 9-3 and they miss the playoffs, he's not getting fired. If Ole Miss goes 9-3 and doesn't make the playoffs, he's not getting fired. And if USC goes 9-3 this year and misses the playoffs, he's not getting fired. Because I read your question as the school will make a coaching change, not so-and-so retires or so-and-so leaves for a better job. You're saying the school will make a change. I'm going to sell that. It would need to be worse than not making the playoff. It would need to be 8 like if Brian Kelly goes 7-5 this year and doesn't make the playoffs, yeah, could I see them thinking about getting rid of him? Sure. But here's the thing you also got to think about. Firings are going to look a lot different now than they used to because you didn't have to pay a $20+ million a year salary to your student athletes in the past.
Yeah.
So you could raise $50 million buyout. Well, now to raise a $50 million buyout, just let's say that's what they, let's say they can negotiate with Brian Kelly a settlement where we're going to pay you $50 million. I think they owe him a lot more than that. You still got to then buy out his assistants on top of a $20+ million salary for the athletes at the school. LSU's not rolling in money like that. Not like that. That's a lot of money to pay people who are no longer going to be doing anything to help you win. So I don't see that. And again, I'm not saying LSU is a broke school or a poor school. They got $1 billion endowment, but that's a different animal. Like that's a lot of money to be. Plus, you then have to pay the buyout to hire a coach.
Yeah.
You got to go pay a school that whatever the fee is going to be to buy him out. That's asking a lot. It'd have to be like a disaster season, in my opinion, to do that. Ole Miss is the only option that I could see happening. I don't know what kind of buyout that Lane Kiffin has, but the buyout for Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly's pretty substantial, I believe.
Look, I'll say this. I'm going to sell this as well for a handful of reasons. One, let's just play this out. Breaking, Ole Miss doesn't make the playoffs. That is consistent with every single year the college football playoffs have been a thing. USC, breaking, doesn't make the playoffs. That is consistent with what has happened every single year that the college football playoffs has been a thing. The one exception is LSU when, let's call it what it is, amazing season, had what I have said multiple times on the show, the best quarterback performance that I've ever seen in my lifetime at the college level. They caught lightning in a bottle with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall, all those guys. I get it. So LSU's made the playoffs once, then they won the whole thing. But I think it would take more than just not making the playoffs. Now, it is a little bit of a different scope because now instead of just 4 teams getting in, now 12 do, and soon to be 14 and so on and so forth. So I get it's a little bit different optics, but it has to be more than just not making the playoffs. Because if Ole Miss goes 9-3 or 10-2 again, doesn't play in the conference championship, and don't make the playoffs, that's just what Lane Kiffin does. That's kind of just what Ole Miss does. If USC goes in 10-2 this year, that's the best season that Lane Kiffin has had in Los Angeles since he got there. So to me, it would have to take a bad season for them, for the program, for the school to make that coaching change. That's what it would be for me. So I'm selling this.
What people have to remember is this era of where they need a minimum $20.5 million to pay players changes the game. Because who's paying that? A lot of that's going to be the people that you are also going to need to raise money from to then go buy out a coach, to fire him, and then buy out a coach to hire him.
Yeah.
You're going to see coaches not get fired as easily as they have in the past in football. Now, I also think what you're going to see is negotiations for contracts are going to look a lot different for some of these coaches. But I'll just say this. A couple of those coaches on this list, if you're smart and you're a school that maybe wants to get rid of that guy, you know he's doing stuff that could give you cause. You might want to start tracking that stuff down and have that stuff in your back pocket. Let's be honest about that. What was the name of the cat at Tennessee a couple years ago? What was the name of their head coach a couple years ago? I'm completely drawing a blank on their coach. The guy that they from Tennessee.
Yeah, I can see his face.
Yeah. Hold on a second. He was at Florida State for a while. What the heck was his name? Jeremy Pruitt. Jeremy Pruitt was winning. The things he got in trouble for get brushed under the rug. If they were coming off a national title team, do you think Tennessee goes through all that and McDonald's bags of cash? You think that if they were coming off a national title season that anybody knows about that? No, they do not. That stuff that Tennessee had in their back pocket for if he sucks, we're going to make sure that we do this and then get rid of him.
Yeah.
So if I'm a couple of those schools, I got some of that stuff in my back pocket in case he's, you don't want to negotiate a lower salary or a lower buyout. Cool. How about we show that to your wife? How about we talk about that? How about we release that internal investigation? You know what I mean? I'm just saying. That's about the only hope you have. Otherwise, you're going to pay that guy way more money than you have.
Yeah, that's facts. Buy so hold from JG Whitetown. Without Riley Leonard, Notre Dame will allow a fourth back to increase carries. Last year as a team, they had 568 total carries.
I'm going to buy that, but it's not that the fourth back will have a ton of carries. I could see a Keidron Young taking on a bit of Riley's short yardage goal line role, but I don't think he's going to go out there and have 40% of Riley's carries. I think the majority of Riley's carries that still stay carries are going to go to Love, Price, and whoever the number 3 back is on the depth chart.
Yeah.
Some of those runs are going to turn into throws. Some of those quote unquote touches are going to go to Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison and Malachi Fields and Eli Raridan and Will Pauling and, Cam Williams, Micah, you know what I mean? Some of those are going to go there, but that's kind of where I'm going with that one, Trev.
Yeah, I'm with you. Buy so hold. Jeremiah Love will not lead the team in carries, but will lead the team in yards this season.
Sell. He'll do both. He'll lead them both.
Yeah, I don't see a world where that happens. I'm with you. Sell. Buy so hold. No team will go undefeated this season. The Big 12 will have more teams in the playoffs. Oh, I'm sorry. These are two separate ones. My apologies. So buy so hold. No team will go.
That's my fault because I didn't put the gap in between them like I normally do. So that's on me. That's my bad. No team will go undefeated this season. We're talking regular season. I will sell regular season. I think there are a couple teams this year that, based on their separation of talent and the way their schedules are set up, will go undefeated in the regular season plus conference championship game. I do think we'll see one this year. Does that mean we'll see a team then go undefeated and run the table in the national championship? I don't think anyone finished last year. I ended up being right. I said no one's going to go undefeated, and I ended up being right. But I thought that there wasn't going to be anybody undefeated by the end of the college football, by the end of the conference championships. I thought there'd be. I was close. Oregon's the only team that kind of got me out of that. So, but like I said, last year, Notre Dame not going to go undefeated. This year, I think they got. Remember, I got asked about this the other day. I said the odds of them going undefeated this year are greater than they were last year.
Oh yeah.
I look at a team like Oregon, who went undefeated last year. They've got a shot to repeat that. I think Penn State's got a shot to repeat that or to have that. It's going to be tough. They got to play in Columbus, I think that Texas has a shot. I think that Alabama could have a shot if the quarterback thing works. I mean, there's just more teams that I think have a chance to go undefeated this year than last year.
Yeah.
It's still going to be tough, but I think somebody will this year. I don't know who that's going to be, but I could see a couple undefeated teams. I don't think anyone's going to be undefeated by the end of the season, because if a team goes into the playoffs undefeated, they will get beat, because it most likely means their schedule is softer than others. Yeah.
Agreed. I agree. Bice, I'll hold the Big 12 will have more teams in the playoffs than the ACC.
So I think and that's not even saying that I think the ACC is a better league. I don't. I think the Big 12 is a better league than the ACC. It's just, as we've talked before, what makes the Big 12 a really good league is there's no top-level team, and there's on any given week, any team in that league can beat anybody. I truly believe that. There's no god-awful team in the Big 12 right now, in my opinion. There isn't. There's some teams that are significantly lower than others, but there's no oh my gosh. I mean, last year, the worst team in the Big 12 was Oklahoma State. A year before that, they were playing for the conference championship. Like any given Saturday, any team in that league can beat just about anybody else in that league.
Yeah.
And so they're going to kind of eat their own. Whereas the ACC has a better shot of having two teams separate from everybody else.
Yeah.
Now, if you'd have put those two teams in the Big 12, maybe they're not in the playoffs, but they aren't in the Big 12. I could see Clemson and SMU, or Clemson and Louisville, or Clemson and Miami, or Clemson and somebody kind of separating, and one of them, Clemson goes 11-1, and or let's say Clemson goes 10-2 again, and because they got a tough schedule, and then some other team's 11-1, and Clemson beats that team, they're both still in again, or Clemson's 11-1 or 12-0 against the schedule they have, and some team that's got two losses in the ACC beats them in the championship game. Because I don't think Clemson's gap is so greater like it was back from 15 to 20, 21, where they were just annihilating everybody they played, basically. I don't think it's like that anymore. There's a lot of teams with potential in the ACC to do that. In the ACC, there tends to just be these teams are they're on roller coasters. They're so different from year to year. I just don't see that same level of competitiveness that I see in the Big 12. I don't. I think two teams, and we just saw it. We just saw it this past year. So, yeah. Because there's some teams at the bottom of the ACC, Trev, that suck.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, one of them, Stanford, they don't even have a head coach right now. It's middle school.
Right. Wake's awful. Florida State was awful last year. Okay, can we talk about Justin Wilcox for a second? That dude keeps leading Cal to bowl games. I'm shocked he doesn't have a better job offers right now. Like I said this to a friend of mine. If I'm Stanford, I'm doing everything I can to go across the bay and get Justin Wilcox from Cal. A, you stick it to your biggest rival. And B, he's a good football coach. And he doesn't have to move. You know what I mean? You don't got to pay housing costs. You don't have to pay moving fees. The dude can stay in his home where he lives now and coach for you. I think I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but hold on a second. I may not be. Let me see this. What's the distance? It's an hour distance between Berkeley and Stanford. Now, I don't know where he lives in that regard, but that guy does a heck of a job. Yeah. I say, sometimes you go 6-6 at a school, you did a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job. Where another guy goes 6-6 at another school and he's getting fired. He's a heck of a football coach. Heck of a football coach. But the team is just not talented. Like I said, there's a couple teams at the top of the ACC that I just think have more talent than the top teams in the Big 12.
I mean, the way I look at it is some of it's just kind of running through numbers. There is a finite amount of top 12 teams that there can be, and a lot of them are just in other conferences. Legitimately, the only way that I see consistently the Big 12 getting multiple teams into the playoffs is like, let's just say an Arizona State is like ranked number 8 in the playoff polls going into championship weekend, and then they get upset in the conference championship by like a 15 seed. And so based on the automatic bids, that 15 seed would get in, or the 15th ranked team would get in, and then they would still put in Arizona State. I don't see it being to where, like, if Arizona State beats the 15th ranked team, the 15th ranked team is just not going to be in it. Like, it's hard for me to believe that, a second Big 12 team would then have to dethrone one of the top 5 Big 10 teams, one of the top 5 SEC teams, and one of the top 3 ACC teams, and Notre Dame. That's tough to imagine. I'm not saying it's impossible, but to Brian's point, the reason why the Big 12 is so entertaining is because the talent levels are very, 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 very similar, but not because they're all super elite.
Or that one
like
is super, like there's not that one team that's a given to get in, and now it's can that second team get in? Like, when I look at the ACC, I kind of look at Clemson this year, probably wrongly, as kind of a given to get in this year. And now it's about, can there be a second team that gets in somehow?
Mm-hmm.
Then the Big 12 was like, what's the given? I mean, the team that won it last year started November with, didn't you say this, Trev? I think you said this, maybe Sean. But going into November, of the teams that had a shot to win the league, I think Arizona State, you had said, was it you that said it had the lowest odds?
Yeah, they were, because up until the month of November, everybody was like gearing up for a BYU Kansas State Big 12 championship game. And honestly, even more so than Arizona State, the team that absolutely blew my mind that they were even in the conference championship was Iowa State. Iowa State had some ugly wins last year, man. And so that's just kind of how I see the Big 12, is they're going to continually beat up on each other because the talent plane is relatively equivalent across all the teams in that conference, give or take some. Like, I don't see like Houston being a player to win the Big 12 right now, but outside of that,
sleeping on Willie Fritz.
No. I mean, again, we're talking about Arizona State, who just won the conference. They were projected to finish dead last, so you just never know, man. But no, I'm selling this. Until shown otherwise, I don't see the Big 12 having more teams than any of the conferences.
It is a good submission, though, because I think it made me think, because I don't think it's a no-brainer that it doesn't happen. Because you could also see two teams that could separate. I think that's this league where it's going to be toughest for two teams to separate from everybody else. It's possible. That's good submission, JG. Very good submission. And it's happening. I thought we were going to get through a show, Trev.
No.
I thought we were going to get through a show where it was not going to happen. And it happened. So, but we'll get down here. Oops. Looks like the thing just went away. So you're going to have to give me a second here, Trev. I have to pull that sucker back up because they all went away. What was the one we just ended on? It was JG Y-Town, right? Is the one
I was talking about the Big 12 getting into the multiple Big 12 teams.
Let me find this. I'm not going to pull them all up. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to bring these bad boys back up. No, come on. Okay. Give me a sec.
No worries.
Gotta pull these back up. I'm about to get them. All right, got that one. And okay, so that one is, and we'll go to here. All right, so let's get these back up. So we're gonna have one from BK's Last Brain Cell, the artist, the member formerly known as he was the Audric Estime one.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so let's get that up there. There we go. All right, back on track.
Buy, sell, hold from BK's Last Brain Cell. Jason Onye will be top 3 in QB pressures and record 4+ sacks for Notre Dame this season.
At D tackle, I would buy that, but I don't know if I'd go there on the entire team. I could see 3 ends leading the team in pressures this year. Record 4 sacks. Let me look at his numbers from last year, because I think Jason could be disruptive, but I don't know if his disruption is going to be a necessarily a high volume type of deal. But basically, this year he recorded 1.5 sacks this year. All of them came against Purdue. He played 5 games. If you project it over the course of an entire season, I mean that's 4.5 sacks. But he had 0 sacks in the other 4 games. Like, I always try to look at that and be like, okay, where did you just have like that one game where you really dominated, or were you a guy that was like kind of regularly, doing your thing? And I think Jason's more of a stuff the run, be stout kind of guy, as opposed to someone who is going to, consistently have great pressure numbers.
Fair.
Now, having said that, he was getting hot, and maybe that changes. So, like, he had 10 pressures last year. He had 2 games of 0 pressures, but in his last 3 games, he was 5, 2, and 3. If he does that over the course of a season, that's over an average of over 3 a game. He plays a 13-game season. That's 39 pressures. That puts him in the top 3. So it's possible. It's possible, but it's just, I need to see him be able to consistently play at a high level, and we just haven't seen him do that.
Yeah. Yep. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame safeties will account for a minimum of 10 turnovers. Linebackers will account for a minimum of 12 sacks. And defense will be top 7 nationally in pass defense overall, as well as red zone defense.
Ooh. 10 turnovers. I'll buy that. I mean, that's less than 1 a game.
Yep.
They were over that. They were around that. If not, they were, just Adon and Xavier last year combined for 10 turnovers, I think, right? Didn't Xavier have 6 and didn't Adon have 4?
No.
Or did Adon only have 3?
Adon only had.
So those 2 last year combined for 9.
Yeah.
Xavier and Adon, just interceptions. And then you throw in Luke Tallett. So they had that last year. That doesn't include all the fumble recoveries that they had. I mean, Rod Hurd had 1. Xavier Watts had at least 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. So, I'm gonna say buy on that one, Trev. What say you?
I'm gonna buy it because it's turnovers in general. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If it was just interceptions, I think I'd be more willing to sell it. At least I would hold it if it was just interceptions, because yes, the safety room got there last year, but 6 of them went to Xavier Watts. I don't know if they're going to have a guy this year get 6 interceptions just in the safety room. Now, conversation could be had around maybe, since they'll rotate more, Stroman gets 2, Blair gets 1.
Yeah,
Tate
but the
Johnson
total number will still be there, right?
Yep. But yeah, for that one, I'm buying it since it's just turnovers in general. Absolutely. The second part, linebackers. Linebackers 12 sacks. Sell. And
I don't think they're going to blitz as much as they did last year.
No, I agree. And then finally, the defense will be top 7 nationally in pass defense overall, as well as red zone defense.
I'll buy that.
Yep.
I can see that.
Yep.
I can see that.
Buy, sell, hold from Robert Garzanelli. My daughter Gianna got accepted to Kansas State for veterinarian school. Congratulations. And she wanted me to ask you, Brian, what your thoughts are on a K-State team this year coming in her freshman year. Kansas State will have 9+ wins.
Well, this is more of a mailbag than it is a buy, sell, hold. But because your daughter got accepted into Kansas State's veterinarian school, and Trevor, as much as you know how much I love animals, and I love people that love animals, because people that love animals at Purdue's vet program were so instrumental in helping us save Rita. I'm going to answer this question. So I'm going to go a little bit outside the box and answer the question on this one. But I'm very high on Kansas State. I am. I look at that team, and they're like everybody else. They have losses, but they have guys coming back in very key positions. I know DJ Giddens was a big loss, but Avery Johnson's a guy that I think is on the verge of a breakout. They're still going to have talent at running back. You know, Dylan Edwards is an impact player. He's very different than DJ Gibbs, like very different. I understand that. But he's still a guy that's got some ability. And so, you know, want to kind of see what he can do. Their backup running backs are solid players. You know, they had a kid last year, Joe Jackson, ran for 200 some yards and was a productive player and limited in time. So I think that they've got a shot to have a pretty good run game. Their offensive line should be pretty good again. They've got a couple transfers that are going to step into roles there. I think that they'll be able to kind of get rolling. The receiving core had landed some good transfers, but they bring a lot back on defense, and that's what I like about their team. And I think Chris Kleiman's a heck of a coach. Look at their schedule. It's not easy. They got to play Army at home. They got to play Iowa State and on a neutral field in Ireland. That's people in Ireland going to care about Kansas State and Iowa State. That's a weird one to have. They got to play at Arizona, at Baylor, at Kansas, at Oklahoma State, and at Utah. That's a relatively not super hard road schedule. Their home slate is UCF, TCU, Texas Tech, and Colorado. What's missing from that? There's no Arizona State. There's no BYU on that schedule. And I think that's going to kind of work out pretty well for them. And then they get Colorado, I believe, at home. Yeah, they get Colorado at home. So I think their schedule sets up nicely for them to be at least a 9-3 team. I do. And I think K-State's got a shot to win that league. But it's all going to come down to this, really, Trev, and it's Avery Johnson. That's what it's going to come down to. What is Avery Johnson going to be this year? If he's what I think he can be and hope he can be, then I think that they've got a shot to win the title. So that's my answer, Robert. And also tell Gianna, congratulations. That is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. So best of luck to her, and I hope she enjoys her time in Manhattan. So that'll be a blast. Be a blast. Did get a buy so hold here, Trev, that I want to bring up from my guy Brandon Pleasner before we move on to the next question.
Yeah. Buy sell hold. Gerby and Emil will be your starting tackles this season.
Can I hope by that? I mean, I'd sell that. Look, and the reason I'm going to sell that is I hope I'm proven wrong, but I just feel Joe Rudolph's infatuated with keeping Anthony Knapp at tackle. I just think that he is. I hope I'm wrong, but I just think he is. I still say my ideal starting lineup is Gerby and Emil at tackle, Jagasaw and Billy at guard, and then let Anthony Knapp and Ashton Craig battle it out at center. That's still my ideal lineup. I just don't think that Joe Rudolph is going to move Anthony Knapp away from tackle. Just don't see it. Just don't see it. Because you didn't have Emil or Anthony at practice today, and Gerby was at right tackle, not left.
Yep. Second buy sell hold from Brandon. Jagasaw's permanent starting position will be at guard.
Buy as well.
Yep.
Now that's what makes me the most upset. I'm okay moving Charles Jagasaw to guard because I think he can be special guard. We've had this conversation a million times. Charles Jagasaw could be an All-American at 4 different positions on your offensive line. Left tackle, right guard, left tackle, left guard, right tackle. So you put him where you can get the line the best. But I just have a hard time accepting Anthony Knapp having just locked that down with no competition at all. And that's what bothers me. Anthony Knapp's not going to be practicing much this spring, and he played 15 games last year, had some good moments, a lot of rough moments. Yes, he's going to get better, but nothing about what he did as a freshman should say position locked down. That's my issue. I hope I'm wrong, but that's my read on the situation for now. But your first buy so hold, I'm buying it, but I don't think it's likely. But that would be the one that makes me the happiest.
Mm-hmm.
It would. So thank you for that, Brandon. Appreciate that, man.
Buy sell hold from Robert Garzanelli. Cam Williams has a breakout year and ends the season as a starter.
by the first part, I think he could have a
Yep.
bit of a breakout of the depth of as we've said, there's layers to break out. The guy didn't play a meaningful down last year. If he goes out and has 25 catches for 350 yards, that's a breakout season. And then a potential another breakouts next year. Ends the season as a starter. Again, possible, but barring injury, I don't think that he ends the season as a starter. But if Cam Williams ends the season as a starter, it's not injury related, which is possible, especially if CJ Carr is the starting quarterback, then this pass offense is going to be really good. Because that means will have had to beat out one of Malachi Fields, Jordan Faison, or Will Pauling. Because barring injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold. The offense will average over 450 yards per game this year and score over 600 points for the season. I mean,
I guess how many games?
I mean, if they play 16 games, they will score 37.5 points a game. If they only play 15, they will average 40 points a game.
Well, if they're averaging 40 points a game through 15 games, then they're going to be playing 16 games. So there you go. I'll buy both of those. Yeah. 450 yards per game. I definitely buy that. I'm going to respond to something in the chat that Sly Fox said. He asked me if Anthony Knapp gets manhandled at tackle by 220 to 240 pound edges, do you think he can handle 280, 300 pound nose guards? Just curious. Notre Dame rarely plays 220 to 240 pound edges. Most edges are over 250 pounds. A lot of them are 260. Some of them, like A&M's, were over 270, 280. So, that's that. Number two, my issue with Anthony Knapp is not that he got manhandled all the time. There were snaps where he got manhandled, the Purdue snap. My issue with Anthony Knapp is this. He's not comfortable in space. He was not to me last year. The other thing is, when you are undersized and you're retreating in that regard, it's going to be tougher to then handle a bigger player. It's different on the inside. When you're playing in tighter quarters, you're anchoring more effectively. You're not doing a vertical drop or a wide pass set, whatever type you like to use. It's a different animal. You're in retreat mode. You aren't in retreat mode. You catch a lot as a pass blocker in the middle, but you're not in retreat mode the way you are as tackle. The other part of it, Sly, is I've said this before. My issues with Anthony Knapp are 100% about his ability to pass block on the edge. I have also said this about Anthony Knapp. There were significant stretches of last season where he was your best run blocker. Not for like a play here, a play there. I mean, stretches of the season where he was your best run blocker. He's not getting manhandled if he can do that. And look at the block against Indiana. What's Mikael Kamara? Isn't he like 265?
Yeah, he's 6'1", 265.
Manhandled. And an all Big Ten guy. Manhandled that dude. Drove him off the ball. He's a strong kid. He's just not comfortable, from what I've seen so far, as a space guy. They have been very athletic, big, strong, physical guys who just aren't comfortable in space. It happens. So that's more of my issue. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, because there's this misnomer that I think he got manhandled. I don't think Anthony Knapp got manhandled a bunch last year. As a matter of fact, most of his worst pass sets were dude just ran around him. Emil got driven back and manhandled more than Anthony did. So that's more of my issue. I just don't think he's a space guy. I don't think he's an edge guy. But he's a very physical, strong kid. Yeah.
Buy, sell, hold from Notre Dame alumnus in Minnesota. The 2024 Notre Dame football team came closer to reaching its ceiling than any Notre Dame team since 2012.
Oh, easy buy. Just because of all the injuries they had to overcome.
Yeah.
And all the things that they needed you need this guy to step up. You need that guy to step up. You need this. You lose your starting left tackle. You need this freshman, Anthony Knapp, to step into the role and handle himself well enough for you to not get exposed there. For all the issues I have with Anthony Knapp, I don't think he can play left tackle at a level that you're saying you're getting national championship caliber left tackle play. He ain't a bum. I mean, he's a good football player. You lose Riley Mills in the playoffs. You've got talented guys that can step in, but they've got to play well. You lose Benjamin Morrison. You need Leonard Moore to step in and play like an All-American as a freshman. He did that. Everything you needed to happen and circumstance had to happen. And now there's a couple of guys that I don't think as individuals reach their ceilings, but it's hard for me to envision last year's team with all the things that happened to them injury-wise could have been a whole lot better than they were. That was as close to reaching your ceiling as you're going to see from a Notre Dame team. Absolutely. I love that submission.
Yep. Good. Great submission. Buy-sell hold from Mr. Emil Wagner. Even though Coach Sider hinted that he wouldn't, he will run the running back room much like he did at Penn State. 2 main guys, leaving very few reps for the 3rd and 4th backs in the rotation.
Sell. Very hard sell. The reason he did that at Penn State, see, here's the thing that we have to, as fans, to consider when you're evaluating what a coach has done. You can't assume always that a coach did something because that's what he likes or wanted to do.
Yeah.
You have to look at what is the talent in the room after him. And the reality is that the talent in the room after his 2 is different than what Notre Dame's was. And that's just something you have to understand. So last year, when you look at Penn State, obviously they only primarily had 2 running backs. Why? Well, they were a more run-oriented team, I think, than Notre Dame as far as their backs, because they didn't have a quarterback that could do some things that Notre Dame's quarterback could do. I think there was a much bigger gap between 1 and 2 than there was between the number 3 guy. But the other part of it, Trev, is the reason that Notre Dame played a 3rd back so much this year and last year under Dylan McCullough is because your 3rd back brought a very unique skill set in pass pro. It's not like Aeneas Williams went out there this past year and was your number 3 ball carrier where he was getting 8 touches a game as part of your base run game. 90+% of his snaps were in 3rd down situations or pass heavy situations. So it's a very different scenario than what you saw last year with Penn State's guys who, Corey Smith is a talented running back. Notre Dame looked at him, very talented running back from Wisconsin. If you remember, he was Owen Strebig's teammate. But he's not a pass pro guy. He's a run the ball guy. You're not going to put him in to run the football. Quentin Martin as a true freshman is not going to, to pass block. He's not going to do that. He's not Aeneas Williams was a kid that had over 2,000 receiving yards coming out of high school. He was a unique 3rd down weapon. And Jabron Payne was a guy that, as a number 3 back, was someone who could go out there and bring you some of that same value as well. So I disagree with that sentiment. I also think that Mike Denbrock's going to have a little say in that as well. So, no, there's no reason to say he won't do that because the circumstances at Penn State, in my opinion, called for that. And much more so than what we've seen. There's a big gap between their top 2 backs and anything else they have after that.
Yeah.
Much bigger gap than that.
Yep.
And we've seen years where he would play 3 running backs. I mean, in 2019, he played Journey Brown, Noah Cain, and Devin Ford. I mean, his number 3 and 4 running backs, Devin Ford and Ricky Slade, combined for 99 carries. So, I mean, Aeneas Williams this year had 34.
Yeah.
So, he'll do what the room calls for, in my opinion.
Buy, sell, hold. This year will show that it wasn't the wide receivers holding back the passing game, but rather it was Riley not pulling the trigger on a lot of open receivers. That was the issue.
I'm going to sell this premise because at times that was true. At other times, it was the receiving core wasn't playing well. I mean, Riley Leonard's not the reason Jaden Greathouse dropped the ball that might have been a touchdown against Northern Illinois. He's not the reason Bo Collins dropped how many passes last year. He's not the reason Bo Collins fumbled the ball against Stanford. at times Riley was the issue. At times it was the receivers. It was a little bit of both. What I will say is that this year will prove that the wide receiving core is more talented than people give it credit for. And I think part of the issue last year was also that Mike Brown was in year one of turning around that room, which he inherited, which was a hot mess.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the year, Riley was better, the receivers were better, and they did some really good things together. I mean, if all the starting quarterback does this season is repeat what Riley Leonard did against Penn State and Ohio State, they're going to be a really, really good passing attack.
Agreed. Yeah. Buy-sell hold over or under for Jeremiah Love for each category. 35 receptions, 300 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. And his last year's stats were 28 receptions, 237 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Buy.
Yep.
Over, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy that he goes over on those.
Yeah.
Since you gave me sort of a mailbag over-under as opposed to a buy-sell hold. So I'll buy that he'll go over those 3 categories. And as he showed, they're not huge jumps.
No. Buy-sell hold from BC from BV.
I love that.
Jack Larson will be a surprise and contribute meaningful snaps during the season.
Buy. Yeah, I think Jack will help Notre Dame this year. Not just because he has to, but I think he can. Yeah, I think he can. I'll buy that.
Yep. Buy, sell, hold from Rikerferg. In 2026, St. Francis will be moving from Division I to Division III due to the ever-changing landscape in college sports. So, buy, sell, hold. More teams will be going to lower divisions due to the ever-changing landscape.
Oh, easy buy. Easy buy. There's going to be a lot of those teams that have FCS football and D1 basketball that are going to go down to D3. Because at D3, you're not given scholarships and you don't have – you're not your rev share is a whole different animal. Different animal. So, yeah, I'll buy the heck out of that. They will not be alone.
Yeah.
And it'll happen quick. That, and you're going to see sports that choose not to do that are going to start cutting sports. And the thing is, to cut one, you got to cut 2. You can't cut a women's team that's not profitable without cutting a men's team because of Title IX.
Yeah. Yep. Buy, sell, hold. If the 1994 baseball strike didn't happen, Montreal Expos would have made a deep playoff run.
So, yeah, I've had this conversation before, and it's certainly possible because I was still a big baseball fan that year, and the Reds were pretty good that year. So I was always very bummed that they didn't. But that Montreal team had the best record in baseball by 4 games. And here's their pitching staff, Trev. This is, yeah. Let me pull up their stats here real quick. This is the pitching staff that Montreal had that year. So first of all, their starting lineup, they had Cliff Floyd, Mike Lansing, Will Cordero, Moises Alou, Marquise Grissom, and Larry Walker. Where they're let's see their pitching. They had this guy named I don't know if you ever heard of him. His name is Pedro Martinez. You ever heard of him? He was pretty good on that team. Their closer was John Wetland. They had Ken Hill, who was a really good pitcher. Jeff Fasaro, Butch Henry, Kirk Reuter was a really good pitcher. That was a really, really good team. Really good team. So, yes, I do believe that team would have made a playoff run that year. Absolutely. It was a really good team. Still upset about that season being canceled, but yes. And Moises Alou and Larry Walker were in their prime. I mean, Larry Walker in 103 games. Like everybody talks about, Larry Walker, his numbers were inflated by playing in Colorado. And I'm like, yeah, they were inflated by playing in Colorado, but that dude was a beast the year before he went to Colorado. 94, his last year with Montreal. In 103 games, Trev, he had 44 doubles, 19 triples, 86 RBIs, and he hit 322. Had a 981 OPS. In Montreal, which did not have a very hitters-friendly park. And so he was a stud, and they played it against Atlanta, New York, Philly, and Florida. None of those teams had really hitter-friendly parks back then. So Montreal, that was a really good team. Really good team. So, yeah, I think they'd have made a run. Definitely would have made a run. little before your
By
time. You
so
weren't even born yet, were you?
no, I was -3.
God, I feel old. I was a teenager. That was the year I got my license. You're fired. You're so fired right now. It's not even funny. I hate young people. You guys make me feel old. I was like, hold on a second. That escalated really fast.
I was about to say, well,
I'm
that'll do it for
sorry.
us today on the Irish Breakdown podcast.
That's not funny. I shouldn't joke about that. Sorry, Trev. That's my bad. Just got real insecure in my oldness real quick.
Buy, sell, hold from We Are Notre Dame, a team outside the top 25 in week 3 will make the playoffs. A non-power 4 can't count.
So these were saying like the group of 5 representative. It can't be that one. I'll go with that. Because like that's a fair thing, because you could have a team that ranks 19th, but they're the highest non-power 5. That's not a big leap to go from that to that. I could go with that. And part of it's because of what we just talked about. I could absolutely see some Big 12 or ACC team that's not ranked preseason go win their league and get into the playoff.
Yeah.
I mean, what was 2024 college football playoff or college football rankings?
I mean,
so
going into week 3, IU wasn't ranked. Arizona State wasn't ranked.
Let's see here. SMU was not ranked.
Okay.
I don't believe I'm see SMU. When was the first week SMU was ranked? First week SMU was ranked was week 6 at 5-1. It's the first week, because remember they got beaten week 2 or 3 by BYU.
Yeah.
So they weren't ranked. So what's that, 4, Trev? So Indiana not ranked. A&M was. Illinois was. Northern Illinois was. Nebraska was. Clemson was. So you had Indiana, SMU, and then because he said
Arizona
Boise
State
doesn't count, and Arizona State. So 3 teams weren't ranked in week 3. Yeah. And where was 2 of those 3 from? The ACC, Big 12. Yeah. And you'll have some team that from the SEC potentially that'll jump in that's not ranked, or like a Big 10 team like we talked about, like with Indiana potentially could make a run. Yeah, I'll go there.
Yeah.
I could also see a team that's like an Indiana that isn't ranked high early get knocked out because they lose a week 3 game or week 2 game and then climb back up by winning. I mean, something like that could happen too. I'll buy that.
Yeah. Yeah. Buy, sell, hold. Georgia will have the same amount of losses this year as last season.
So are we talking, what did Georgia end up having last year? 3, right?
3 losses, yeah. Or well, are you
two
like
2 in the regular season, one in the postseason, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they lost to Ole Miss, Alabama, and Notre Dame.
Yep.
Let's see here. Let me pull up their schedule, because we talked about this. Their schedule's tough, but not as tough as last year. I don't really like this old. So Marshall, Austin Peay, Tennessee. The Bama game I'm not sure of. Kentucky at Auburn's going to be tough. Ole Miss at home. Florida on the road. Look, dude, I'm not high on Georgia. I'm going to sell. I think they're going to have a war. I don't think I really am leaning towards Georgia not making the playoffs this year, Trev. I really am. Yeah, I really am. Yep, I am. So I'm gonna sell that.
You'll think they'll have more than?
I think they'll have more losses than they regular season. I'm going regular season.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay,
I think they'll have more than 2 losses in the regular season. I think they'll be a 3-loss team this year. Yeah,
I like that bold prediction.
Because here's the thing: it's like you look at their schedule. I don't love their O-line. I don't love their quarterback situation. Their defense isn't as talented as it was last year. And you look at their schedule, they've got to play at Tennessee, home against Bama, at Auburn, who's going to be improved, home against Ole Miss, Florida on a neutral field, who played them tough until DJ went down, Texas at home, and at Georgia Tech. They got to go 5-2 against that schedule. And I don't think they're going to be as good of a team this year as they were last year. That's my hot take. I could be very wrong on that, but that's my hot take. I've been saying this for the last couple of years. I think Georgia is a team that is going to slowly ascend down. I think Kirby's success was bolstered by his Todd Monken hire.
Buy, so hold. Miami will make the playoffs this season.
Sell. Very easy sell. I don't think Miami's a playoff team.
No. I mean, if they didn't make the playoffs last year with Cam Ward putting up the numbers that he did,
and that receiving core,
then they're not this
year. And after watching Xavier Restrepo run a 4.8 at the pro day, don't ever talk to me again about how a guy can't be really good in college if he's not fast.
And then buy, so hold. BYU makes the playoffs this year.
Buy. And it's early, very early, but they're my early pick to win the Big 12. I like that team.
I like that. Buy, so hold from Brian P. 05. If Deion Sanders and Colorado actually have a spring game against another school, this will become more common, giving schools more incentive to continue with spring games going forward.
Buy. Yeah, you'll see more. Sure.
Yeah, I'd buy that. I think I don't know if they should, but I think that if they do it, I think more schools will follow suit. So yeah. Buy, so hold from Domer Grizz. Tight end will be the worst position group this year. Not that you expect them to be bad, but just not as dominant as the other groups on the team.
Buy. I mean, I don't think they're going to have any positions that are close to being bad. They didn't have any bad positions last year. Somebody's got to be last. Ohio State has somebody that's the worst position group. I mean, if you're going to use the word worse, and Domer Grizz did put, quotes around it because it's relative. Something had to be the worst part of your team, right? So I could see that, especially with all the injury questions at the position.
Yeah. The injuries is kind of what sets us over the top for me. Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
This
is formerly the Bronco 30CH guy.
Okay. Well, buy, sell, hold from Teach Like a Champion. Dunham's commitment will have a major impact on the rest of the 2026 class, and commitments given that we rarely get commitments from 5-star caliber edge players.
I remember a time not that long ago where Notre Dame got 3 5-star edge players in one class: Aaron Lynch, Stephon Tuitt, and Ishaq Williams. Well, first of all, Rodney Dunham he's not committed to Notre Dame in any public way right now. So he's got his announcement is on April 10th. And until then, we're going to let him kind of have his moment and go through that process. But I will say this: if Rodney Dunham commits to Notre Dame on April 10th, then yes, I do think that has a big impact on the class. Number one, it starts the dominoes at that position. And number two, I think North Carolina is a state Notre Dame's trying to have more and more success with. And number three, I think anytime you get a big-time kid like that, then that's going to have an impact on the rest of your class. Sure. No question. So, yeah, I'll buy that. If that happens, I will buy that.
Buy, sell, hold. Joey O'Brien will be the next to commit after Dunham.
It's possible. Again, Dunham will announce his decision on April 10th. If it goes well for Notre Dame, then I could see Joe O'Brien being the next to commit. I could also see no one committing until June or July. Is possible. I could see if things go well this week, Caden Finley could potentially be a guy that makes a decision. I could see Gregory Patrick maybe making a decision early if depending on how things go. Not that it would go to Notre Dame, but just potential guys that could pop. Certainly. Yeah. Because Rodney Dunham didn't come in. No one saw him announcing in April until recently. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Buy, sell, hold from Teach Like a Champion. Both Braden Robinson and Caden Finley will end up in the 2026 class.
So I'm going to hold on that. I like where Notre Dame is with Caden Finley. Braden Robinson, I gotta do a little bit more digging on. I mean, he's not going to. He just announced the Final Four of Arizona, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Miami. Yep. I like where Notre Dame is in regard to beating Arizona for him and Miami for him. Ohio State's the one that has me concerned. And anytime you're recruiting receivers against Ohio State, there's a reason for pause.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm gonna hold on that one because I just need to find out more about where they stand with Braden Robinson. But it's possible. This is a possible 2-man class, but gonna hold on that one for now.
Yeah. Buy, sell, hold from Jake, 85-89. Jadon Blair will be a starting safety by the end of the regular season.
Again, it's possible, but I'm gonna sell it for now for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I think he's gonna play a bunch. I don't know that they're gonna force him into the starting lineup. Like take some of that. He could still play more snaps than the starter, but you take away some of the pressure of you're the starter.
Yeah.
If you're already gonna have a rotation. Sometimes that can just be about what's the best way to build the team. And if you're going to already rotate him with a veteran, why not start the veteran? That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, totally. Buy, sell, hold. One of the red shirt, maybe they meant
I
red
think he
shirt
meant
freshmen.
sophomores. Yeah.
Okay.
Or did he mean red? Maybe he meant red shirt freshmen.
I'm thinking red shirt freshmen.
Yeah. So that'd be the Cam Williams. Yeah. He actually know what he did because I actually deleted that part out because I didn't have room for it to get them all in there, but he did. Actually, it is the red shirt freshman. So you're correct, Trevor.
Okay. One of the red shirt freshman wide receivers will have at least 30 receptions this year.
Can I hope? I'm going to hope by that one, Trev. Sometimes we hope by. We don't know if it's going to happen or not, but we want it to happen. So I'm going to hope by that one. And I'm going to do the same thing with the next one about Gilby Lambert will be starting at tackle at either side by the end of the regular season. Like those two, I'm hope buying the heck out. I mean, I'm hope buying kind of all three of Jake's propositions. Because if Jadon Blair does start by the end of the year and it's not related to injury, it means he's just so good that you can't not start him.
Yeah.
That's a great place to be in. And if like Jadon Blair's a starter, one of the redshirt freshmen has at least 30 catches, and Gilby Lambert starting at tackle, and none of those things are related to injuries, Notre Dame's going to be really good. Really good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm hope buying all those, man. Hope buying all of them. That's the kind of mood I'm in, Trev. I'm hope buying all of them.
I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold from Joe Parr. With Miami losing their top 6 receivers from last year, as well as their top pass-catching tight end, and replacing them with only one portal receiver, and even though some incoming freshmen have looked good in spring practice, and I don't think Carson Beck is as good as Cam Ward, Notre Dame wins this game by double digits.
I mean, I keep getting asked about winning Miami game by double digits, and I'm going to have the same answer every week. I'm going to sell that for now because I don't know who Notre Dame's starting quarterback is going to be. I don't know what their starting offensive line is going to be. And predicting a team to go on the road and who's against a solid team and winning by double digits is asking a lot. Could that change by the time we get closer to the game? Sure, it could. But right now on March 26th, when I don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be, and I don't know who the starting offensive line is going to be, and I don't know if Boubacar is going to be healthy for the season. I don't know if Jordan Patel is going to be healthy for the season. I don't know who the starting safety opposite of Don Schuler is going to be. There's a lot of things I need to learn about this football team before I'm ready to kind of go their specifics. But is it possible that Notre Dame could beat Miami by 10? Of course it is. If they could beat A&M by 10, then they can beat Miami by 10. It's just early. It's just a little early for me. No, just can we just wait till Notre Dame names the starting quarterback before I start making predictions about scores for early games? But Joe, your question's not absurd, and the premise of your question is totally on par with why I don't think Miami's going to be as good as people think they're going to be this year. Because they did all lose their top pass catchers. They don't have a quarterback that's healthy and that I have a lot of faith in, and he's not nearly as good as Cam Ward was. All of those things are true.
Yeah.
All those things are true, but I just need to see this Notre Dame team come together first. So I don't have any issue with your submission, Joe. It's just not where my head's at right now. I'm still in coach mode. I'm still worried about building up this team. I'm not worried about Miami just yet, but we'll get there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I'm going to hold it like I always do at this time of the year because it's just what does Miami do in the second portal window? They're going to go to the portal again for more players. How's that going to impact their team in the fall? There's a lot that we got to learn first before I'm ready to confidently say that one, but it's certainly possible. And then we got 2 left.
Buy, sell, hold from Audric Chestime. Joe Rudolph is working Charles Jagasaw at guard to save a spot for Anthony Knapp to stay in the starting lineup at left tackle.
No, I believe that to be true. I'll buy that. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong about this one because and it's not just there's an anti-Anthony Knapp thing. I think Anthony Knapp could be an All-American center. I do. I've said this. It's just I don't think he's a left tackle. I would love to be proven wrong, but I just don't think he's a left tackle. I think moving Charles Jagusah to guard eliminates any real competition for Anthony Knapp, unless he does intend to move either Anthony Knapp or Emil Wagner or Gerby Lambert there. And I hope he does.
Yeah.
Last one.
Buy, sell, hold from Bobby Frey. Cam Williams will rank in the top 3 among all pass catchers in at least 2 of these 3 categories: receptions, yards, and touchdowns.
I'm going to sell. I don't think he'll rank in the top 3 of any of those. But I will say this, Trev, and we'll end it. This is a great way to end. If Cam Williams ranks in the top 3 in either catches, yards, or touchdowns for this Notre Dame football team, and it's not because somebody else got injured or tanked, then this Notre Dame offense is going to be really, really good. And I'm a lot closer to buying this today after the 2 practices we saw than I was before fall camp started. How about them apples to end on, Trev? What you think?
You guys heard it here first.
You buying that or selling that, Trev?
I'm as much as I would love to buy this, I am also selling it. There's a lot in front of them. I think when people talk about finishing in the top 3 categories in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, I think the tight end room and now a more involved running back room is kind of going under the weather or under the radar. So I think that if Cam Williams does, this offense, barring it without being injury, this offense is pretty nasty. But Jeremiah Love has been working more as a pass catcher. We know Aeneas Williams' skill set as a pass catcher. Eli Raridan is going to be poised for a good year. We had a question about Jack Larson earlier. Malachi Fields still isn't on campus. Will Pauling is now on campus. They still have Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. Look, it's a spoil of riches, and it's a good spot to be in. But if Cam Williams, through all that, works his way up, and all of them are still healthy,
and nobody just tanks, just bombs out. Like, he was number 3 because Faison stunk, and this guy stunk, and that guy stunk, and kind of like 2016, which I don't see happening.
Nope. It'll be a fun year.
No doubt. Well, that's going to do it, Trev. So we're going to get done before the guys start at IB Nation Sports Talk, which is going to get started here in about 3 minutes. So before they get started, Trev, why don't you go ahead and take us out of here?
Really, really good submissions today, guys. As always, I say that every week like I'm surprised. You guys really, really kill it with a lot of the submissions on the message board. Be sure to tune into IB Nation Sports Talk, which is probably counting down here relatively quickly. Go over and check them out. Best way to stay in the now. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. Whatever streaming platform you watch us on, whether it is Spotify Podcasts or Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, you guys know what it is. The best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow at 1 p.m., that is Brian. I'm Trevor. We will see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.